morning, afternoon, or evening. For the PressCorps, I'm Jeffrey Jennings, and welcome to the first verbal edition of the Foxhole Developer Player Roundtable. Today's topic will be logistics. Joining me today is Foxhole Project Lead Mark.
How's it going, everyone?
Volunteer Foxhole Discord Admin Sir.
Hello.
KronusWinter of Winter Legion Logistics.
Hello.
And HNS Wolfie of the Colonial Sigil.
Hello.
Now, these community members were chosen because I believe they have very unique insights into logistics, and when put in a room together would make good conversation. However, they are by no means the definitive voices, simply because there is no definitive voice. As always, I urge everyone watching this to write out their thoughts on Reddit or Google Doc or Word document or what have you, and urge everyone to do drafts, think hard about these things, and be open to different points of view, because they take a lot of work and affect everything. Everything's interconnected here in Foxhole. And additionally, just because the developers are receptive to something doesn't mean it's coming. But, as Mark always says, anything is possible. Finally, amongst the group, we have an 8-hour time zone difference. We had to do a lot of fancy scheduling, so I'd like to thank today's guests for joining me here, taking time out of their day, out of their week, their Christmas weekend. Mark is coming in off the clock for this, so thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, I guess we'll get right into it. I've asked everyone. This is going to be the most formal part of the whole discussion. I've asked, because I know everyone here has a lot to say about things, so I've asked everyone to prepare their overall logistics philosophy. How they interpret that is up to them, but I've given the group up to 5 minutes to soapbox. So, with that, I think we'll start off with Mark. You good?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, go for it. Your time sounds like a debate. I promise this. I really hope this doesn't turn into a debate, more of a discussion. But Markfoot, go for it.
Yeah. So, I don't really have anything planned, so I'm just gonna
shoot from the hip. Go for it.
Shoot from the hip, exactly. So I think that if there is one thing that I do want to say is that we definitely, whatever the future of logistics is, we want to make it for actual players that want to play logistics. And that might sound like an obvious thing, but I think a lot of the voices that we hear are often from players who don't actually like that side of the game. And they like the other side of the game. They like the combat aspect. They like playing like an operation. They like using tanks. They like shooting. And I think that it would be a mistake if we were to make logistics for those players, because making logistics for those players means a forcing function towards less of a logistics game, less depth, more simplicity. And we were there before already, right? So another thing I want to be careful that we don't do is that we don't retread the old ground, even if things aren't perfect now. And I don't think they are perfect now. I think there are a lot of problems. What we don't want to do is go into circles, right? So if we rewind time back to around April, May, a lot of the conversation that we were seeing, a lot of the voices that we were seeing was from the logistics players, right? We were hearing a lot of feedback on how logistics has become too simple, has become too streamlined, and there were a lot of voices that were saying this, right? They were saying everything is done at the port base. There's like an unlimited amount of resources. There's no roles. Every player is able to do everything, and players don't have to work together anymore. And these were the things that we were hearing. People were very loud about it. I think people tend to forget that these were the loud voices all the way back then, right? So we obviously made a bunch of changes in Update 26, and it flipped the table in favor of pushing into multiple roles, pushing into players having to work together, pushing into limited resources, pushing into not having these magical like port bases. And where we landed caused a lot of strain for players who don't like playing logistics, right? And also strain for players that do like playing logistics too. So definitely not saying that where we landed was, super amazing for all the Logic players and, really crap for everyone else. But I think the thing that was sort of where it hit people the most was the players that just wanted to be able to do everything on their own, that didn't want to work with other players, that wanted it to be streamlined, wanted the fastest route to be able to make a tank, right? So I think if there's something that we're definitely going to be focusing on in the future is, first of all, we don't want to go back to that because we'll be going in circles, right? So we want to push, whether you love it or hate it, the foundation we have is what we're going to build on, and we're going to push towards building logistics game for players that actually like doing logistics, that actually like to spend, they enjoy the grind, they enjoy working with others, they enjoy having to work in groups. That's definitely where things are going to go, right? And I think that there's a lot of, if there's problems that we want to fix, it's going to be problems from those voices. So the players that are doing a lot of Logi, we want to listen to their voices, right? So, sort of if you're coming from the standpoint of, I just want to make, I just want to make a tank as fast as I can, I'm sorry, we're probably, it's going to be hard to listen to that feedback. But if you're a Logi player who's constantly playing lots and lots of Logi, and you're the type of player who likes to work with others, we're going to listen to your voice more, right? So, yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Just so everyone knows, if you hit 0, I'm not going to immediately mute you, admin style. I'm just going to, like Sir style. Not kidding. But I will. But just I'll let you finish your thought. So, Markfoot, thank you very much. Does anyone want to go next after that? Because if not, I'll just default to. I'm sorry, who? Cronus?
I'll just go because mine's super simple. I just want everyone from the basic soldier to the farmer to the driver to the scrapper to whoever you want to call them. I just want them to have fun. The goal of me doing logistics all the time isn't I just want everybody to have everything, and that's what I do for logistics. I try to fill every depot on the front with as much material at a time to make sure that the front is always having fun and always has equipment. That's my philosophy for Logi. Logi is, stuff is in the back, you bring it to the front.
All right.
That's it.
Simple enough. And next, sir, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Go for it.
So I actually had a bullet point in my thoughts because otherwise I'll ramble for the next 5 hours despite the limit.
I know that's why I have the limit. I knew all of you were capable of doing that, so go for it.
Sure. So for me, logistics was probably at least 80% of my draw to Foxhole way back in the day. And the main draws to logistics as a gameplay element was that it was incredibly satisfying. To be able to produce, the things that people need. You're creative, and I actually lump building into this because it just goes hand in hand so often. You had a lot of player agency going into it, making these decisions, going, okay, we're going to go ahead and tech this, we're going to do that. And it scratched a lot of those itches for me that other games have either abandoned or never fully grasped. RuneScape Squad, even Minecraft, and even survival games, I see a lot of overlapping of this element of producing and creating. And to me, logistics should ultimately be a system. It needs to be smooth. Gears are turning, people are cooperating, or individuals can do what they need to do. So in a smooth running system, you don't have anything arbitrary preventing a person from going, all I want is this item. They have to go through the motions of each step to go through it, but they don't have to scale it up to an entire war. And I think that's important for the single person, but it's important to know that that type of system can be scaled up to a logistics team. My clan specialized in just that. We took everything that was currently there, scaled it up into a smooth running system. And a lot of the aspects, I always brought up like scrapping, as a role. But it's less about sitting in one place and holding left click to scrap to take care of that mining itch. It was actually more about being able to continuously contribute, and you can contribute based off of whatever level of whatever mindset you're in. If you were just having one of those days, just want to sit around and scrap, then you could do that and sit there and chat and contribute, talk. Or you could go as far as driving across the world with the supplies. You could micromanage the factories so you can get your items in. All these roles were emerging basically naturally from what logistics was. And it also meant that at the same time, these roles could be performed by one person should they need to, but you're going to have an extremely better experience if you do it as a team. Like, team logistics was like the greatest thing on the planet. It formed clans. It gave people something to do that wasn't just combat. Don't get me wrong, combat for me was a huge part of the game. You couldn't have one without the other, otherwise you're just playing Factory Simulator. But it gave a lot of gratifying, that little dose of emotions or whatever it is, to say I was able to successfully bring you these items, and that successful thought may have only lasted a split second when you dropped everything off and everyone's like, hooray, you're already gone, you're driving back because you got to do another run. That was really it. And a lot of the smoothness for me needs to not have a lot of arbitrary things in there stopping this from happening. This is why I take fault with timers so much. Because they are incredibly, seemingly arbitrary. They serve their purposes, but
1 minute.
They really could do, the same things were being done in the old days without the need for this. At least to my feeling, having done that all the time. So I don't know. Like, we lost the super satisfying smoothness that was logistics. There you go.
I appreciate the excellent timing you had there of when, as soon as you said, this is why I hate timers so much, I told you 1 minute. So there you go. All right, Wolfie, last but not least, got something for us here? Real quick, is this did you have like a script, or are you just shooting from the hip? Or bullet
half
points?
Script, half hip.
All right, yeah, no, that's how I do it too. All right, whenever you're ready.
So I just want to say this beforehand, is that sorry if I don't express things as accurately as I want to. English, not my first language, so not that advanced in word choice. But anyway, so my logistics philosophy is just going to be, logistics should be a core system of the game, and even though that may sound inaccurate, as it kind of already is, but if you think about it, what I want to express is that it should be a greater version of what it currently is, right? So like the current logistics system has many flaws, and we are mostly familiar with all of them, but I'll list them in a bit. But the main problem I have is that with the system itself is that it's very primitive. And sorry, one second.
This is basically me doing the radio show every time I go on air. I've got about 10 windows open at the same time.
Not enough.
Okay, so yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, so what I mean to say, looking at the actual system of the game, is that the tasks are very primitive, in my opinion. Like, when you're like going through the whole process from scratch, is that you're going to scrap, right? You're holding mouse 1, then you just walk up to your vehicle, click, put it in. Hold W, press A and D sometimes, drive, and then take it to a logistics town, refine it, and then do some more clicking until you get it into a factory, then you make it. And then what happens is that you take it to the front. Now, that's fine and all, right? Like, but the just seems like it's a distraction more than anything, because like I like to do logistics, right? But sorry about that, but yeah. But what happened? Sorry, I'm kind of lost here. Yeah. So whenever someone goes to do logistics for, let's say, like to supply a front, right? It always feels like logistics is like just constantly supplying something more than anything. You could say that it's, in other words, that it's a lack of objectives. Honestly, like there's not really anything that you're building to. I mean, tech is automated, but as some people have complained that tech shouldn't have been automated because it takes away kind of a reward system from the scrappers. I just don't really like. I like the tech idea of being able to tech certain things. It's just that the execution of it, which is just holding M1 to get a part or so, then refining it into research, is just not what I was behind. So I'm kind of going around the whole topic, but I'll just say that it should actually like just you could just say that it should just have an upgrade of just whatever it is currently, right? Like you have many of these primitive tasks, and it just does, and to most people it just feels like that's a distraction, as I've said. But as Markfoot has said, that he wants to design it for people that actually want to do logistics, which is fine. But like what I feel is that even though it's designed for people that want to do logistics, like the task is still primitive. Like it's still not really that fun, doesn't really take much skill. Like it's very basic. Many people I've spoke to told me that they could just they could have multitasked, or they do actually multitask easily while just doing logistics, because it's a very chill aspect rather than something that has constant engagement. Like there's just a lot of driving, a lot of this, a lot of that. So there should definitely be a lot of stuff. Like for example, something that so something that I constantly notice is that there's a lot of there's a lot of lacking factors in something that not many people notice, which is animations. Like you could go to refining, but it's just click. You don't really see anything. There's not really spectacle. You don't feel rewarded about anything. So it doesn't really feel like you're doing anything. It just feels like some mini game that you're doing to supply a front is just something that has been drifted aside instead of an aspect that has such a spectacle. Like combat has simple functions, like with a rifle, where each man has a rifle and he's just pointing and clicking, but really the spectacle of everything being player built in terms of structures and actually everyone shooting and just things flying everywhere just provides the spectacle, right? You could say that's the same with logistics operations, when you just see like everybody's performing a role. You have I guess flatbeds going here and there. In the same town, you see everything going out. You see that you're shipping things. But then what happens is that like most of the time there is no spectacle. Like okay, when you're in the town, this is for me at least, is that I play in very down times of the game, as in there's not that many population. It's not that I struggle to start off, but it's more like just a lot of times that I feel like I'm doing solo logi, right? And even if I do get in an op, sure I'll be like or the previous term quartermaster, but then once the people go out and it's just a bunch of clicking, like managing effect or logistics sounds fun, but I just feel like I'm kind of going around the topic, but basically all of my points is just that it's just feels like a distraction more than anything. It's very primitive, just should be upgraded to have some depth into it, or a lot of depth into it.
All right, yeah. I've seen a lot of common threads, which is even for those who hardcore do logistics, it's not rewarding, it's not fun, or at least as rewarding, as fun as it needs to be to make up for the work, as a lot of bloat and not as streamlined. But at the same time, apparently it doesn't have the right feeling of depth. Certainly there's a lot of depth there right now with cranes and shipping containers and and mining and whatnot. But I guess it's depth in the wrong direction. We'll explore it a little bit more. So let's ditch this timer and let's open it up. Let's actually converse. I guess I'll kick it off to Mark here. What are your thoughts on any of those? On any of those philosophies or approaches?
Yeah. So
feel free to jump on top of this now. We're going to open it up.
Yeah. So the positive thing is that I think within everything that was said here, I think I'm in like full agreement, and I don't. These are, it's like everything I'm hearing here is basically the same thing that like we want, right? What makes it difficult is when there's a lot of like other voices that are actually kind of like opposing some of the stuff that is said here. That makes it hard, but I agree. And to be honest, for the last year, let's say year and a half, we've been wanting the same thing, and we had a really big plan for update 26. We had to cut down on it, like what always happens. We always start off with like, hey, this is what it should be. This is the grand plan, and usually what ends up in there at the end is maybe like a third of it, just because just a simple function of time. And I think that we probably fell short of implementing a lot of these things. Like the things being said about logistics should have more depth. There should be ways you can progress as the war goes. You can build up things to optimize your workflow. One of the big things that's missing, that I think that we've at least brought some of it into fruition in update 32 for the base building, is there is more persistence now. Like it is raw, it is like bare bones, but there are players that are coming to me talking about working on these bases over the span of like days. Like they're coming back every day to improve what they had. And I think that one thing that is lacking in logistics right now is that it doesn't have that same element. You're not improving your logistics workflow as the war goes on. You're sort of coming back every day, and you kind of almost have, what makes it kind of worse is you almost have to do like a reset every time, right? Like you come back, you got to remake your flatbed trucks, and you got to remake and you got to like, there's been to like, we played logistics before internally, and we've done things that we wanted to do. Like, okay, if you want to set up some sort of like mining operation on Handsome Hideaway or something like that, you can do it. You can do these crazy things, but then one of the big things is that it's very flat. You come back the next day, you have to start all over. It's not like you come back next day and you're like, okay, I can continue to add to what I started. And then by day 3, 4, 5, you take a step back and go like, look at this crazy infrastructure that I built. Now it's like operate, and more so, not that I built, but that I built with other players, which people are doing with the trenches right now, right? At least in the back line. I'm not talking about like the frontline trenches, but the ideal for us is like players are working together in a group to build out these like optimized logi routes, and especially things like being able to do logi over water. It's very primitive right now. Like you literally can't come back the next. Like you have to start all over, and that starting over part, I can tell you firsthand, it sucks. Like I've spent like hours playing logi, and that's the one thing that still really bugs me, is that if there's a small sort of like kink in the road, that it takes a lot of time to like overcome, first of all, which to me is not even that bad if you can come back and you don't have to re-overcome that same obstacle again the next time. You're sort of like, okay, it's really painful, it's really hard, but you overcame it, and then next time you come back, you can continue to capitalize on having overcome that. Then it'll be fine. But right now things are so flat, and trust me, like when we did update 26, there was a lot more that we wanted to happen as well, but it didn't happen because of time, and some things we had planned to sort of like do afterwards. And this is something that we're still figuring out how to manage too. Is like we always want to do everything. Trust me. Like when we hear all these voices from the outside, there's an equal number of voices. Well, maybe not an equal number of voices. That's wrong. But there's a lot of voices on the inside that also want it to be better. Like I'm always hearing things from my team, like, "Hey, Mark, we should do this. We should do that." People on the team are sending me, like threads on Reddit. "Hey, look at this. You should do that." And it's like we're just trying to do so much. And I think that maybe if there is a mistake that we sort of made, is that maybe sometimes we should focus on less so that we can actually finish some of these things, right? And I think that's one thing that I do want to do in the new year is focus on going back to update 26 and being able to like finish what we started. And by finish, I mean like there's a lot more work to be done, right?
I know we're talking about getting started. Oh, no, Cronus, you have something?
I have so much I can say to that. Like,
Go for it.
One of the best things that ever happened, and I forget which war it was in Great March, right south of Meridian Stay, on the where there's the road going west and the road going south. There was a group of people who painstakingly built this gigantic resource hub, and it was the coolest thing ever. So what they did is they painstakingly drove cranes. This is before cranes are faster and could be built at town halls. They drove tons of cranes, resource containers, and fuel trucks to south of Meridian Stay, and the way it worked was you would pull in with a flatbed with a resource container, and they would take the empty container and you would just tell them what you want, and they had been running all the mines, all the fields, and they had just stacks of salvage, stacks of sulfur, stacks of components. They just had everything, and it was one of the coolest things to experience. And this was before I had my major logic group and everything, and we were just basically making BMATs and shipping little by little. So this group spent probably a day and a half building this base, then probably even longer just to get the resource containers there, and it just made the system so much easier because it's so hard to get people who are willing to drive back and forth to just get basic supplies. But this was a group of people who were like, we're going to make this easier on everyone, and they did, and it was great. But it was really hard to keep up with because people would show up, all of a sudden flatbeds were missing, either the cranes were gone or the resource containers, because nobody put garrison supplies there, were rotting, so people had to fix them. And it was just this really cool thing that if there was a way to support doing that more often, places like Great March or like Fahrenheit Coast, or in places where it's a lot harder to get resource containers to, it would probably encourage more people to run the fields there. Mark, are you aware what motorcycle logistics is, or motorcycle mine tending is?
I'd like to hear more about it.
So what you do is you get a minimum of 1 to 2 resource containers to a mine. And after you do that, what you do is you just grab a motorcycle and you start driving around to mines as they fill. You go to a mine, and you stop there, you tend to the mine by taking everything out, obviously, and then you put it into the container, and you keep this process going, and when you have a container filled, you do the classic switch the containers so that you can always keep a flow of resources going. Another thing players are starting to do is, because of the way upgrade parts are transferred, is you split a stack of 15 into a mine so it will not be able to produce upgrade parts, because if you're all the way in the Swan and you can get 15 upgrade parts, some people just don't bother with that because, I understand that people want upgrade parts, but some people are just like, I can either take 100 components or I can take an upgrade part. Most people opt for the resource that is, useful to them. And then you'll end up with, a safe house or a house or a town hall with 100 upgrade parts, and then somebody will painstakingly grab 15 at a time and bring them to the front because low efficiency is a thing now. But that's basically biker logistics, is what people do. And all the things you said about waking up and just having to start over is something that it kills me on some days, because I've been working out of Blemish, and some days I wake up and it's like, ooh, I've got all of these shipping containers I made, and let me actually explain my shipping container issue. Is I only build 40 shipping containers because I hate the storage depot. I would sooner burn the storage depot down than sit there and pull garrison supplies out. It is the most painful experience to sit there and see 90 shirts sitting in the storage depot and going, I could move all of you to a forward storage depot, but if I do that, I get to sit here with an auto clicker and empty you. Like, something we will struggle to do, like, hey, did you appreciate the crane I put on top of the vehicle factory in Blemish the other day? That was great. So what we do is we will glitch a truck ever so slightly to get it off the ground, and so people can run under it. And then what you do is you sit there with a full truck and you just auto-click, and you drop all the shirts on the ground, someone picks them up and puts them in a storage shipping container, and then you ship it to a forward depot, and all of a sudden you've saved people time. Because do you know how long it takes to ship from Blemish to Loggerhead Storage Depot? It's a 23-minute round trip. You can only get somebody to do that so many times before they lose their mind. Anyways.
So I think that's what we call a problem. If players feel like they need to go to that extent, several types of glitches. I don't know, Sir Wolfie. What is your take on this? On the long queue times of storage depots? I don't know, either one of you.
So
yeah. Well, do you want? I'll just go first then. Something just that I really felt with the storage depot pulling is that as this is an issue with the current system, a lot of times is that I see people like they're always constantly tilted about the systems, like when whenever it comes to time consumption and especially the garrison supply issue, right? I definitely find like adaptability is a solution to this. Like, even though the issue exists, right? I'd rather like adapt to working with it than instead of complaining and actually playing the game. And it's like, but then there's another issue to even adapting to that, which is what I thought was a workaround, is that you would constantly have like, you would have a population or a community of logistics players with you that are operating at the same time, right? And obviously the time consumption just makes you bored with pulling out stuff from the storage depot. So what I would do is that I would have had like someone rotate. So for example, someone would do a pull from this depot, and then I would just have someone else do it, just to have it constantly rotating, so no one person is stuck to be like, oh, I'm the single person doing this. Now we spread it around like a bunch of people, right? But the problem is that there's a lack of communication when it comes to logistics, right? Is that the problem is that you never really know who's with you on logistics. Like, there's lots and lots of solo logi people. Like, I remember there were countless numbers of times that I would try and do a shipment to a place, right? They're like, oh, we need shirts. The shirt count is at 10, right? And then as soon as I get there, there's already like 200 shirts. Like, the miscommunication can actually, like, if there was communication, right, and people would just I guess respond. But the problem is that, again, there's a lack of chat categories, because even if they are people that actually communicate, there's just everything's cluttered into one chat that you don't really know, or it just gets drowned out whenever you just call it out. And so it's just I'm just gonna say that there's that issue that you just can't even adapt to it.
I'm going to disagree with that, because war is chaos, and to me, personally, I almost feel like shirts shouldn't be removable from fobs. Like, if you put 10,000 shirts into a fob, well, congratulations. I think they should just be there. But that's another story.
So I'm going to kind of go backwards a little bit. I wanted to mirror a couple statements and give past experiences with how it worked for us. When it comes to adaptability, these logi towns or bases that are player constructed, this used to be the norm. we, in order to maximize our efficiency in Reborn, back when they were BLD, we had to do what we called tent cities. And these were nothing more than a line of barracks, anywhere from 5 to 30 barracks in a row. And what this allowed us to do is have somewhere that you could store things without having to interact with another timer. You're not sending them to a town hall. You're leaving them in their packaged form or unpackaged, however you want to ship it. And it also acted as this buffer. You could keep up with your drivers by always having a buffer of stuff to go out, or at least try your best. But we had to manufacture this new, unintended use for the barracks because it was so perfect for us, and it was, I would say that it made a lot of what we did possible. It took one chunk of the timers out of it, and it's not even really that necessary of a timer, because it was a timer that was added in addition to your process. So if you do something right now you have the stockpiles, right, the storage depot. In order to do your logistics as a random person, you're submitting into that, and then you're having to pull that out. So this timer gets injected into your workflow in a very annoying way. And this is one of the things that Barracks has solved for us, the tent cities, is that we skipped that. We said, why are we doing this if we're going to be touching the same item in the next 10 minutes? Now we don't have barracks. We have to make do with whatever else we have. So now it's rows of trucks, or it was after that it became the shipping containers. But now we can't safeguard the trucks because they go unclaimed in 15 minutes, and then you're basically screwed if someone walks up and hits the button, which happened to us mid-combat yesterday, where one of our CVs, just some random who they didn't know what they were doing, they didn't know the effect that they would cause. They walked up to hit a button, and that was enough to derail a massive op, or to at least put a big wrench in it, right? So from a logistics player, having that type of risk involved just really makes it so we don't want to do these things. So we're always trying to innovate, how we can make our process more. Wolfie was speaking to the communication. I actually think communication has always been a huge issue, and I really wish the whole chat update had actually hit, because I was really looking forward to that personally. But even to a clan, our internal communication, once you get 10 to 20 people working on this stuff, it can get a bit hectic, keeping track of things. For a while, we actually were using Trello, of all things. Yeah,
I know
we were
what that
using
is.
Trello.
Oh my god.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, so Trello, you can think of it. I explain it as virtual post-it notes, right? You have little rows and columns. Virtual post-it notes, and you move stuff around. We actually min-maxed it to the point where we had a template set up for each and every item, and someone could say, "Hey, this place needs this." So we would copy that card into where it needs to go, and then you could click and drag it along the process. Okay, this is currently cooking. This is currently waiting for a driver to be picked up. And a lot of the drivers wouldn't ever look at that, but it helped us keep our thoughts. Like most of us Logi players were doing this thing where we had a legal pad sitting next to us. You were constantly writing stuff down, and it's just yes, that's a bit much. Yeah, I would settle for a chat window sometimes, but we were our innovations for logistics are going, further and further and further, and it's really because there's a lot of gaps that we need to fill or feel the need to fill. Mm-hmm. Or need to work around something that gets injected into the workflow that is just really annoying, like timers.
I would like to add to that with your Trello thing is the container color thing was probably one of the best updates ever, because the way I work with containers is they spawn red, so red is empty, yellow is a work in progress, and green would mean full. Now, that's if I'm supplying one storage depot. Green is full. if I'm supplying multiple fronts, we start color coordinating where they belong. So recently, I did green goes to Fearmore, blue goes to Drowned Vale, Loggerhead, and Callahan's Gate or Abandoned Ward, which was more preferable because defending Callahan's Gate is a meme, was black. So I was trying to ship out stuff, and having filled shipping containers was one of the best things that could ever both happen and not happen to me, because be it them new players or players who just don't want to do the whole building, refining, and making stuff process, they come up, they see all these filled shipping containers, and they assume I'm either hoarding or not doing anything, and I'm like, no, I'm just waiting for drivers. And they come, they take containers, and it's like, well, I had a plan for that, but you need it, okay, take it, and then the container goes away, and the flatbed goes away, and it's gone forever into the void of I don't know where, and then I have to go make another flatbed, and then the flatbeds are broken, and I have to spend 90 RMATs to make one, and then I die inside, and I cry, and then it's just this repeated process of trying to just fuel a front, and everybody wants stuff, but I always come back to refineries are more efficient with more people, but factories are most efficient with 2 people. It got to the point where it was so bad where if there was a place with a factory, I was like, I need 2 people. Here's 2 shipping containers. Here's BMATs. Go fill up that depot. And if somebody wants the pain in the ass of pulling the crates out, putting them in a town hall, then pulling the BMATs out again, and then putting them into a factory to make something, they can. But I'm not doing that. There's been this insane guy named Seed in Deadlands, and I've been shipping him thousands and thousands of BMATs, and he just eats them all. And it's just good thing he has an auto clicker. That's all I'm gonna say. And it's so hard to do your own thing. When I went to go make shirts for a front, and they needed shirts, but we needed garrison supplies, but 3 people ahead of me made garrison supplies, and it was 50 minutes for me to get 4 crates of shirts. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not waiting 50 minutes for 4 shirts. So I went through my shipping containers, and I found the one with the most shirts, and I said, I don't care. Go to the front, get rid of this shipping container. I guess I'll make another one. And something that confuses me is that a very complex vehicle like a truck that can drive itself costs 100 BMATs, and a shipping container, which is a steel box that holds crates, is also 100 BMATs. And it's not bad if you have 3 people in total building a shipping container, but when you're sitting there trying to make a lot of them because you hate the storage depot with such a fiery passion that you would sooner, make 45 shipping containers than use the storage depot, you get pretty bored sitting there making them. But if you get help, it's 33 clicks, it's not as bad, but you still don't want to make more. They're so expensive, and it's been more efficient to just build trucks, put 15 crates in, and give the person a crate, send them to the front, have them drop off the supplies at a fob, and then just tell them to teleport back. That's been the most efficient method of logi for places like Farragut Coast and Endless Shore, because there's no storage depots around that can't get sniped by a gunboat. I hate gunboats.
And on top of that, the whole truck thing, you find all these different uses for the trucks that are not even as a truck sometimes. But it is incredibly painful that shipping containers, you log off, or even trucks for that matter. Trucks are a little bit less painful, but when you make 40 or 50 shipping containers and you leave them somewhere, expecting that they would be used for that purpose, right? You leave them at a scrap field, for example. Say, I want these to be here. They will never be there when you come back. Okay. The next day. Like, you just go, oh, I just wasted all those hammer hits. Now I have to redo it if I want to pick back up where I left off.
Yeah. And part of shipping that kills people is the back and forth is pointless. And it's like, well, it's not pointless, but it's like the moment you go to, like, Loggerhead, you just spent 12, 11 minutes driving there. You unload your container, and there's just nothing to say, well, congratulations, you just drove here, you dropped off supplies, it's useful, but now you just have to complete the chore of returning the flatbed, because it's expensive. But even though flatbeds they're cheap, they're 30 RMATs, it's so painful to wake up one day, build 7 or 9 of them, or like I think the most I built in one day was 15. And you log on the next day, you look in the storage depot, and there's 0. And then you send a team out with bikes, and you say find them and look for stuff. And like the other day, we found 2 tanks in Blemish, not in Blemish. We found 1 tank fully armed, locked and loaded, in Barrowstown. And I was like, well, somebody might be saving this. And then we sent another team down because there was a vehicle just barely on the radar south of, like, the most southern part of Heartlands. It was a fully loaded tank with 40 shells, a full tank of fuel, and it was unlocked, just sitting there, no defenses. And we were like, we have no idea how you got here, but then I had 2 tanks to give away, and they disappeared. And that's another thing that really upsets me is all these new players have been showing up, and they're running up to me, and they're building half-tracks, or they're building tanks, and they're like, so where do I get petrol? And I'm looking at the crude oil mines like, there's 1 cannon there, there's 1 crude, so in about, I don't know how long, there'll be 2 more, and then you have enough fuel to drive from Blemish to maybe the front, where you may get lucky to, share in the petrol scarcity. It's why I've always wanted to advocate for more one-way shipments of stuff and find a way to get more people to tend to mines so we have resource containers. Like, it's nice to get an empty shipping container back because I can fill them very quickly. And without a constant flow of empty containers, I have to resort to either making more and slowing down my factory time, or I have to dreadingly look at the storage depot, consider it, and then decide that if I did that, I would sooner rather just Alt F4. So I don't do that, and I just make another shipping container.
I want to bounce back to Mark here, just for a second about.
Yeah, he's been too quiet.
No, about all these things. Oh, he's a good listener. No, but Mark, I guess coming off of all of that, what is kind of the balance in your mind? And again, this is just what your thoughts on it, so it doesn't mean necessarily has to be law in the game. But what is your balance between how much someone needs to work for it versus how much work will fatigue a person? Like, where do you think that balance lies in, I guess, nebulous term, but or some other way of going about that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that there should be work, and I think the amount of work obviously is an ongoing balance, but I think it's not being able to save your work. It's just the real killer, right? It was what I was saying before. Trust me, I spent hours doing Logi because I wanted to make it a point that I can feel the same pain. Well, not the same. Everyone has their own experience, so I'm not going to say the same. That's the wrong word. But I want to at least be able to experience some of the pain, and the pain that we've experienced is just that. I think things should require work. If you don't have work, then you don't have a reward system there, right? If everything you can hit a button and you get it instantly, that's not a game. But I think that the work, perhaps, the work you have to do every time, I think is incorrect. I think that some of there's a lot of little annoying kind of barriers that you do have to overcome. I think and some of those are, so it's multifaceted. Some of those annoying things we should just fix, and they're straightforward, relatively. Some of those things, they're annoying, but they're so interconnected with these other parts of the game, right? There's the griefing, there's the snowballing, there's the short wars, there's a whole list of things that you poke at one end of the ecosystem, the other end of the ecosystem is affected. These are more complicated things, right? And things are annoying. I'd love it if we just be hey, let's just fix that annoying thing. But in this particular category of annoying things, you have to change it, being okay with maybe making something worse in some other part of the ecosystem, right? And then there's probably another category of things that are just in terms of the sheer amount of work. It just takes a lot of time to fix those issues, right? So in terms of the actual amount of work, again, I don't think necessarily that there's too much work. I do think that there is too much work that you have to redo, and I do think that there are a lot of little annoying things that don't need to be there, right? That make that worse. That make that grind worse than it should be. So I'll say that.
Yeah.
I guess one possible solution, again, not confirming it here at all, but one possible solution, I guess, would be some form of personal banking system. I don't know, I'm just going to throw that out there. I know Cronus has a lot to say about that, because I think you've mentioned it multiple times. I'm gonna actually punt to Wolfie. Wolfie, what do you think about that? Some form of personal banking system, balancing that out with the fact that, hey, one person can't, Cronus here, he can't just, hoard 30 flatbeds all to himself. So, she has to share it with the team. You have to work as an army. So what? I know, because I know you can. I know you would. But, yeah, Wolfie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just have a lot to say, but I'm just gonna. But the personal stash systems, I was actually about to say that. Is that honestly, a common issue, especially in this time, is that with the new players, right? They don't know what they're doing, and this has happened to me as well, countless times, which is the inability to store stuff, and then you have to adapt to it by trying to find a way to keep it to yourself, so you don't have to go through the grind of getting set up again. It's definitely a huge issue, but I don't think this is probably controversial, but I wouldn't think it would affect much if there was a personal banking system, because if you think about it, right? It's a lot, at least for an example, when tanks come out, when tanks get teched, right? It's everybody is hoarding everything. Component fields are empty. Cronus is dead. There's just you just can't do much about it, right? And it's if you have the personal banking system, then that just means that you can just, keep it to yourself, right? And then what would happen is that it just wouldn't make a difference, because there are people who supply the actual front, and then there are people who actually do supply for clan operations, right? But there's also the need for you to actually hoard to supply the front, which is the whole shipping container issue, right? So then what happens is that then we're just in this paradox of how do we keep it so that our stuff aren't stolen, and recently even an issue on Reddit happened where someone deployed a container and he wanted to submit it to the refinery, but then someone else took the resources from it. So I just wouldn't think it would change much. It's just going to be balanced if it would just introduce.
So I'm going to be even more controversial and say I hate the idea of a personal banking system. I know that even with limits. There are people out there, myself included, who would find a way to game it hard, or with the correct limits in place, it would make it that still not worth it, right? What would you put in there? A truck is meaningless. We abandon those all over the place. Yeah. It takes seconds to get. So that's gone. The next obvious thing would be some type of combat vehicle. Well, if you have any type of combat vehicle, you will find 20 of us to sit there, and I know, we would do it, 82DK would do it, Sam would do it, everyone would do it. We would sit there and we would stash all these things. Okay, everyone go online, spend the time, get your vehicle, put it in your pocket, go log off. We're ready for the next event. Let's log in and let's mass deploy 20 half tracks. Just boom, just out of your pocket. Aha, here we go. Half tracks, and then you're on. You're going. Now I know that's kind of the same effect as a stockpile, but it is a massive. Not only are you pulling those items out of the game, which is I think a big issue right now from a design standpoint, is people are now taking items out of the game into your personal pockets. There's the whole refinery glitch right now,
or out of the ecosystem.
Right. Well, and it's out of the ecosystem completely, and I think that's out of the spirit of Foxhole as a whole. Like I think personal, utility items like a sledgehammer isn't much. It sucks having to go find a sledgehammer. But is that really worth the time it takes to find your sledgehammer, put it in your pocket, log off, come back? Like at what point does it become worth it to actually store things in your personal inventory, and then at what point is it too damaging or not really conducive to, teamwork? And I actually, it's funny I say all that because I think that stockpiles, the operation stockpiles are also inherently flawed in that you're setting these timers and then it's cool. You're able to actually prepare in a safe and secure manner for the most part. I just think it's funny that we created what amounts to be a personal pocket for operations, but just in the world and able to hold items. But it to me hasn't been worth it. We did an operation yesterday, and the amount of stuff that was in that stockpile was very little. Having to build up in general is actually the issue. It's not having to do this personal thing. That's almost an irrelevancy if you are able to rapidly replace things, or within the reasonable amount of work. Being, I log in, I need a truck. I can go find the B-mats or get the B-mats real quickly, make my truck, and I'm going, right? It's that time that it takes to go from I just logged in to I'm actually useful. That is painful. And when you have things like the long trips across the world, this adds in those interruptions to being prepared. I have to go find B-mats. I have to go to a different region to get B-mats, and then I have to go there and find out that there's a timer to get B-mats, and then I have to go get fuel for my truck. I find out that someone just yeeted off with the fuel trucks, and now I have to go get a fuel truck, and it's just all of these things that are in the way that make something like a personal bank that much more enticing. But in all actuality, it's just a way around a bigger issue.
Lack of time. Do you know? Just interjecting. Do you know what Operation Stockpile Hopping is?
Not the phrase, so...
No, I don't know what people would call this, but, there's a group right now, and what they're doing is they're building 5 operation stockpiles. I don't know why 5 is the magic number, but it's like 4 or 5. And what you do is you take everything you want, no matter what the material is, and you set your op to the next time when you're going to be on, and then the stockpile does the open thing for people to come get it. So you get your guys, you get them together, and you just shove it in another stockpile that's yours, and you set the timer again, and you repeat this process in rotation to have the material. Like right now, I think someone said there were storm tanks in it. There's a group where they take 6 storm tanks, and they're just rotating it between stockpiles, and there's like relic trucks, and they have all this rare material and tons of material, and it's just being rotated from one stockpile, being locked behind another, then locked behind another, then locked behind another. The thing is that in Foxhole, as much as I love my personal bank, as much as I love being able to log on and have 60,000 to 100,000 B-mats to sit there and spend the day just having fun doing Logi, to be honest, that is a huge detriment to the team. Like, there is no reason for the refinery exploit in any way, or for personal stockpiles for the way the gameplay for Foxhole is. Like, if I make a crate of shirts, no matter what, I cannot have those 10 shirts and say these are mine and they are my respawns. I put them in a fob, and if I respawn 10 times, congratulations, I've broken even with the amount of work I've done. And if I've spawned 11 times, I am now a detriment to the team. And if there's some guy, some guy named KronusWinter sitting in front of a refinery, and he has a Logi team, and he is clearing out all of the resource fields, and he is taking everything, and, he has it all in his personal bank, that becomes an issue, because technically it's more efficient for a refinery to work with multiple people than it is with one. Because, I can have, my explosives usually is like a 2-day queue. It takes 2 days for it to refine, where if I simply take one other person, it goes down to a day. I take more people.
Yeah. That is why I think you drill down to a root of the issue. Like we're all enticed to do these things to keep things as mine, because the cost of time to ramp up to being able to play the game or be useful in a true manner, it's got all these different hurdles in it, timers and scarcity, and it creates that enticing need to, I need to protect my stuff. I need to, this is my precious,
Yeah, but it's also like, it's really disappointing when like I see a front line and there's no shirts, like there's like none, and I go to the factory and I'm like, I'm gonna make some shirts. Well, everybody else is making shirts. Well, that's not bad. It's all personal. I don't know where they are. The timer, it's 30 minutes to make shirts, or it's even worse. Somebody's making garrison supplies. I can't make shirts. That front's disappearing. I can't do shit about it because the factory is just clogged up. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely a good mechanic to limit the manufacturing power of a team, but when you break it down to you can't do Logi because everybody else is doing Logi, I mean, how do you fix that system so it's for everybody, or do you go the other route and go the route of the Quartermaster and say, this guy's in charge of this factory, you can place, like somebody suggested a thing where it's like, okay, you place an order, and then the Quartermaster fulfills it if he wants to, or he doesn't, but it would require Logi to be such an overhaul, because, again, factories are most efficient with 2 people running them. Refineries are most efficient with as many people running them. And the need to hoard resources, even if, like, you said, okay, we're getting rid of private queues entirely. There's no such thing as a private queue. You can't use the refinery exploit anymore. You can't just do it. Before the refinery exploit became as well known as it is and as whatever, all you'd have to do is grab a bike, grab a motorcycle, grab an LUV, and start driving around through bushes, and you'd find blue boxes. Just the other day on the rim of Blemish, I found 2 blue boxes sitting in a bush trying to hide themselves, and they were full of R mats, HE mats, all these things that you could put in Operation Stockpile and hoard it yourself, because it's not hard to trick a couple of new players to join your squad, make the stockpile, get it going, and then congratulations, you now have a personal Operation Stockpile. There's somebody who does that, and I don't like it. Now, an Operation Stockpile, because you have to only put crates in there, no matter what you put in there, if it's a crate, eventually it has to go into a fob, which is shared with everyone. So the only time Operation Stockpiles really become an issue is when there are the people who are like, here's 10,000 RMATs in an Operation Stockpile, and I've seen this. This one group, there was a lot of them, so it's justified, but people get pissed. They see 10,000 RMATs, and they're like, oh, well, that's why I can't have a tank. That's why I can't have fun, because this one group is hoarding the materials so they can have fun. It's the classic, he has something I want, and I can't get it because he has it. Because as much as I love the scarcity of resources, the legitimate fact is there are 6 hours between the field being cleared to the field respawning that anybody in those 6 hours cannot get components. Period. You can go, but what about the mines? Well, yeah, the mines you can usually do, and when the maps are open like this, where it's a full north-south fight, there's usually more than enough mines you can go camp one and get what you want. But that also brings up another issue, is there are people who sit with auto-clickers at refineries and they snipe resources. And what happens to those resources, I don't know. Like, if we got into the griefing part of this, there are people who, they commend farm. They take public resources, they make public mats, they take public mats, and they'll make whatever is fastest in the factory, and that's all they make. Like, the other day we had an issue with one guy just sitting at the refinery taking public mats. There was 0 public B mats in the refinery in Blemish, and he would take every B mat that spawned, and all he made was blood plasma. There was already 100 blood plasma in the storage depot, so we were like, could you stop? And he wouldn't stop. He just kept making more and more, and then the other day he came on, and he started making more again. And everybody was pissed because, the current, like, if you take away private stockpile, like, resources, the public resources simply favor greedy players. That's just how it works, if one player logs on and decides, I want that armored car, I want that flatbed, and I go to the front, there's no way to stop it. They can do that as many times as they die or they please, And anybody who's legitimately just trying to make like a harvester, which is the best worst thing to happen to logistics, they can't, because one player who either just wants to hoard the resources or just says, well, they're public, I can do anything I want with them, regardless if it's beneficial or not, you know?
I just want to punt to Mark here real quick. What do you make of all these so far? All these strategies, the 5 stockpile, clan stockpile strategy, the motorcycle strategies. I have up on the, you can't see it, but on the recording I have a picture of Sir's Trello page for all the different logistics requests. What do you make of all these things? And I guess going back to also that plasma, that guy who just keeps taking public basic materials, what would you do in that situation? Do you think it's legitimate? Do you think there's a problem there? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like, I guess if you don't mind, I want to go back and talk about the private storage thing, right? So that's like again, that's like a rabbit hole conversation. There's so much involved there. But I think what we can do is we can at least take one aspect of it, like one subset of that problem, and maybe we can start by fixing that, right? Which is like your need to have to, a very simple example, one of the reasons why you might want private storage, and again, this is not the whole problem, this is, I want to emphasize, this is like one small part of it. You might want to be, okay, I can stash my crane or my flatbed truck so that when I come back, I don't have to like redo that work, right? That one small problem at least can be fixed by, like, you know, you can just make a static crane, right? So there are some parts of this problem that you can fix without having to sort of completely tackle that problem head on, right? I think that this is a conversation that we always have internally. I generally, we don't like the idea of private stashes. That's something we've been seeing from the start. But we still talk about it, right? We still talk about it because it's tough, because if you are, it comes down to like this, like if you are a player that likes to share, right? Like your whole thing is you just want to help everyone, right? Then having a private stash is going to be good, right? It's going to, if for that player, it would help the game, it would help that player, and everything will be good, right? But if you give that to a bad player, or one player that's not in the spirit of helping other players, right? Not in the spirit of helping the war effort, or even worse, if it was like a griefer, that'd be even like a worse case. Then you have a huge problem on your hands, right? Like we have, and that stuff happens all the time in the game. Like one example of a problem that we had previously was players would, at the start of the war, they would clog. This was a long time ago. It's like maybe more than half a year ago. Players at the start of the war would go and clog all the factories with I think it was like G supplies orders or something, so that team couldn't make any like SS at the start of the war when it's like super critical, right? And it's just one of those examples of like when you have a sandbox game, right? This is going to happen. And moreover, a sandbox game where players are expected to work together with a large team. There's a reason why nobody makes this game, because it's too hard, right? And you have all these problems. But so it's tough though, because again, it goes back to like the ecosystem, because it's really easy to say one thing or another, like, oh, well, just fix that problem. Just don't have, you shouldn't make it a sandbox. But the moment you don't make it a sandbox, then you add all these things that players like Sir doesn't like. Like, you have to add in like a timer. That's not a sandbox. You have to add in this thing that, it takes time to have to like pull things out of a stockpile. It's no longer a sandbox, right? But so it's like, the ultimate would be, okay, you just make everything a sandbox. Everyone's in the spirit of the game. Your problem is solved, right? But the reality is that we want to try to get as close as possible to a sandbox, but because Foxhole is such a unique ecosystem, you have to put in these things to sort of solve these magical problems is what we call them, right? And then hopefully through time we can figure out a way to remove some of these magical elements and try to like restore some of that sandbox, right? So it's always this fight between wanting to make the game more sandbox. That's for sure our goal. Having to deal with all these problems. It's just a constant struggle, right?
It really is a struggle, because the first thing I thought of when you said, we want to make it a sandbox, more tactile, less magic, something more hands-on, is mining, is holding down left mouse 1, right? And but then at the same time, that's a major issue for so many people, which is holding down, left mouse 1 so that you can sledgehammer a component field, or just even hammer a scrap mine. But even at the same, that is the most hands-on thing you can possibly do. But then that becomes an issue. So it's tough. It's tough. I don't know. Wolfie, you got an idea on that?
I guess
Between you and Mark, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I can wait till after. I wanted to ask a question to Sir about something he said earlier, but I'll wait until after.
So many things to say.
I know you do. Go ahead, Wolfie. We'll go Wolfie first, and then Mark, Sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, again, this is something that I've said to many people, is that, like, logistics, as much as, like, many people have many ideas that, like, this would be good, or, we need to decrease the time, it's like, sure, but once you do all these things, then because it's just a network of issue, you try to fix one thing, it just goes to the other. So you try to fix, for example, you try to remove timers, make a mechanical process. Like, okay, sure, probably it's fun, because you're actually doing something instead of staring at a timer or waiting for it. But then, depending on how fast they make it, or your ability to produce said items, that just means that you're gonna have players with overflowing much more items than, or crates of supplies than the game is scaled to, if that makes sense. Like, you could have someone build like a whole fortress of trenches, gun nests, whatever the hell you want, right? But then you have the timers, right? And it's like everyone's used to that you can produce like this set amount, and you're gonna have to build it up instead. But instead, for example, if it were just to take like 1 minute just to make each crate, then you would have like 1 million HGs, 1 million just explosives, and then boof, that for is gone. And just a lot of things happen, which is like the war goes faster, then then you won't reach tech. Like, it's just an insane thing. But I just wanted to say, is that, bouncing back a bit, is that this is probably going to be like the worst idea. But what if, like, but I thought, like, of this thing for a long time, is that what if, like, not the whole system, right, but if the system could be reworked in a way to support unlimited supply fields. And that may sound stupid, but like, a lot of times when you want to do logic, when you want to help the team, right, people want to get something like a flatbed. But the problem is that everything, like, literally the hoarding and the timers are so bad that, then you don't even, you literally cannot even get a single component. And even if you do, it's like in a region that's really far away, and it's like the consumption of time. It's like, why do I need to go to that length, right? Because it just takes too long. But if you had unlimited resources and you could just go to the same region, then you could just get set flatbed. But the thing is that I didn't really think that out, right? Because obviously, like, that just breaks the whole system, like, in a lot of ways.
That breaks scarcity, which we could absolutely relitigate update 26 again. But yeah, I don't know. Well, yeah, go ahead and finish that thought.
Yeah, but like, because like it just seems wrong to me. It's because, like, the thing is that people, they get on at certain times and may have schedules. Like, definitely me, I am a subject to this. Is that, like, sometimes there are people, or specifically clans with like certain activity, right? And probably these clans want to do a large operation, right? So then they just go off hoarding. But then you just want to do like some simple logi, like while you're here, just want to burn like an hour that you got before you gotta sleep for school or something. So, but then you literally cannot do anything. So you just can't even play logistics or just play the game, and you can't even help. Like, you're just gonna have to go a logistics truck, but it's just a lot less effort and a lot less rewarding than everything. But I just want to throw the idea out there.
No, that's actually a really good point. The problem you just brought out there. We'll go to Mark and Sir, but I think we'll revisit that soon enough.
Yeah, before I get that question, I actually want to comment on what was just said about the pacing of the war, which was exactly like the problem that we're always faced with. It's like you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, it's easy to just want to take out something like a timer and make the game more sandbox, right? But that definitely affects things like the pacing of the war. That definitely affects things like snowballing. These things that cause a tremendous amount of pain for a whole bunch of other players. And I'm really glad that you're able to recognize this, recognize the complexity of how hard it is to balance these sort of things, right? But anyways, going back to that question I had for Sir, I wanted to ask you to clarify something you said about previously you had the barracks to lock things, and I wasn't quite clear on whether you said that was a good thing or a bad thing, because you later subsequently was saying that you're against the idea of a personal bank.
So
what sort of where's the line there, right?
Did he mute himself and not realize?
I think you're muted.
Aha. Yep. So to kind of clarify, we did not use them as personal long-term storages. They were in the moment storage, a buffer, and we would never expect them to stick around until through the next war. But we always had enough people online to that they were rarely left alone for more than a couple hours. Like, overnight, you'd have someone using them, or maybe we'd have another clan, also take part in using them. But they were never a long-term storage, or were rarely a long-term storage for anything more than BMATs, and maybe that was a buffer. You always had an accumulation. You had BMATs flowing in, you had BMATs flowing out, but we never dipped below an X number of barracks is full of BMATs. And a lot of that just amounted to just being able to rapidly grab things as you need it and rapidly store things instead of putting them in trucks. And usually these tent cities would take they would be along a road somewhere, along a logi line. Or maybe we had multiple, especially in the case of the original World Conquest test. Way back in pre-alpha, we had two of them working congruently with two different logi centers flowing out, because you had that extra width that you needed to cover. But we were able to do that, and we were able to make these tent cities, our short-term, stockpile, so that we could walk away from it for more than 20 minutes, and not expect it to go away. They would be squad claimed. We did have a couple that were not squad claimed usually, just so people could throw stuff in or take stuff out, rather, like spawn supplies. We always had an abundance of spawn supplies. If someone needs some spawn supplies, go here, grab it, and go. Take it where you're going, and that was a public thing. So it was less about the long-term or overnight storage and more about the next 30 minutes, because you're not thinking from a logistics standpoint necessarily. Once your system is going, at least you're not caring about what's happening tomorrow. You're caring about who needs what right now, and a lot of the detriment that would throw a wrench in our plan would be someone walking up and taking a truck of stuff that was just about to go out the door, or doing something to hamper us in the now. And it was less about the future with that. But these tent cities would typically last, a few days, if not, through the entirety of the war, and they would be used for that time, but they was not designed as a long-term storage. So maybe that clarifies their usage.
So it was less about wanting to stash things and saving it for a future session, and more about being able to like organize your current workflow with any disruption.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's exactly what I do with shipping containers, but that's possible.
And that's why I brought it up. Is it was our, at least then they were our shipping containers. You know, we had. They acted as even as a drop-off point. If you had our return trips used to be actually useful because we would have a couple scrappers in the fields they needed to be in, but our return trips for people delivering stuff to the front would typically take them past, you know, X scrap field. So that scrapper's been working, the scrap team has been working, and they will have a couple boxes of scrap ready to go. And they've been contributing these boxes of scrap to other people that wanted to get scrap, so they drive up and we're like, oh, no, just take it, you know, because we're outputting constantly. But we were able to load up the return trucks with those materials. And don't get any ideas. I don't want 5 map long return trips with that type of stuff in mind. But like it was tangible and actually useful to make that return trip, especially because, you know, the reward for these return trips was that it also wasn't taking 20 minutes to get from A to B and then back from B to A, but it was also something that needed to be done anyways. So you get that efficiency flow, and then they would drop it into the barracks if they didn't have time to make it all the way to the refinery, but they would put it in the barracks, and then someone could submit those and refine them. And that's back when refining was a one-click done. Like that's back in the day of no timers for refining. So maybe the flow would be a little bit different. And I actually think the barracks would be better then, because then you could concentrate people who are actually at the refineries to be able to use it. But then you get into the issue of timers taking so long that you're not going to see your last submitted B map for the next decade or whatever. So, but there's definitely room in the flow for something of that nature.
I can say with certainty that with 100,000 BMATs, if I have the factories and Blemish to myself, it only takes about 5 to 6 hours to get rid of 100,000 BMATs. I don't even want to remark how hard it is to get that much salvage. And at the same time, constantly dumping like, one thing I do when I'm playing Logi and I have all these BMATs, I try to do a couple of things. One, minimum of 10,000 public BMATs. Make sure both the vehicle factory is full on BMATs, the construction yard is full on BMATs, and the factories have, the factories should never run cold. Never run cold factories. Always have things being made. So the process would be get all my queues going in the factories, build a shipping container. When the queues are done, fill the shipping container, and then, you know, just repeat that process until I end up with a field of shipping containers and I'm finding someone who's willing to drive to the front. And because it's a pain in the ass to unload and reload shipping containers, we're always looking for storage depots to use, but there are certain storage depots where just because of gunboats, you just can't use them, like Mercy's Wish, Victa, Prairie Bazaar, kind of Loggerhead, but we were forced to use it because we couldn't hold on to Lockheed. You know, I'm just trying to cut down on the time for people who are like, they're not bored of driving. Like, I get some players who they're like, hey, you got another filled shipping container? And I'm sitting there like, I would, but the storage depot is empty. Everything's empty. Like, I am of the philosophy is, if it's in Blemish and it's in the storage depot, it has no right being there. It should be on a storage depot closer to the front, be that Fearmore Abandoned Ward or wherever, you know, where I can safely put my material that takes hours and hours and hours to make, and it's not going to disappear because someone sneezed a gunboat onto it. You know, it's stuff like that I try to do because it saves time from someone. Hey, I'm going to teleport to Blemish. I'm going to build a truck. I'm going to fill my truck. I'm going to go back to Farragut Coast. I'm going to teleport back to Blemish. Instead, it's like, oh, hey, Victa has stuff. Maybe I could go to Victa, and I can load up, and I can drive back and forth, and it's less of a, I'm going to teleport. I'm going to teleport. I'm going to teleport. But if you put stuff in Victa, and somebody sneezes a gunboat onto the shore, you lose your storage depot, and you lose half of what's in it. So it's like, I'd rather not. Because... Yeah, what's up?
I wanted to acknowledge the whole driving thing. It's interesting because, like, if there's a role in logistics that can be filled, you will find some poor sap that wants to do it.
I find people who love it. They love it. Like, I have these shipping containers, and they're all color-coded, and it's like, hey, do you want to do a short trip? Okay, take the green one, you're going to Fearmore. You want to do a long trip? Okay, take the blue one, you're going to Loggerhead. And they enjoy being able to switch up where they're going, and they know what they're delivering has been predetermined. Like, I would love it just for a test. If there was a way to introduce a Quartermaster system in a Logi hub, like add a new Logi hub.
An official Quartermaster system, something implemented as part of the game. Okay.
Yeah, like something like Markfoot and the team would have to sit down and actually develop, and I'm sure it would take way too much time. But I would love it if there was like a specific Logi town in like Reaching Trail and Great March, the furthest away from the front you could possibly be. So it's something that people who are dedicated to doing this position like have to do. And the way it works is if you enter that town and you put resources in the refinery and the factory, well, congratulations, it's all going to one guy, and that one person has the power to control all the resources that enter it, and all the, or better yet, not all the resources. Skip that, because managing the refinery would be a nightmare. It's factories that can only be run by that person. Only that person can run the factories. That's a better way to do it, because
I've always hated a role, like a forced upon role, like the QM thing. Well, a lot of people hated it. I loved it. We made use of it, and we were already making use of QMs in Reborn, like for many months, if not year, before it was ever whispered in the community as being a role. But it served its purpose, but it was also player driven. It was, this would be faster and more efficient if we had someone who paid the attention.
Right.
So they would.
Like what about a voted in position Quartermaster? Like somebody spawned, like, so let's say I spawn and there's another Quartermaster there. Like, I understand that I shouldn't be able to take the job from the person. Maybe you can just have two Quartermasters now, because people are like, hey, we trust both KronusWinter and we trust Sir. Okay, so there can be two Quartermasters in this town. And if the system works really well, maybe there can be like some dual systems going on. You got the public refineries and factories, and then you have people like me and you who are like, okay, that front needs shirts. Here's a crate with 40 shirts that I can instantly pull from the storage depot and send out. Something that allows players who legitimately want to help not suffer, oh great, I'm going to right-click and spend another minute and some odd seconds just pulling out 3 crates of garrison supplies that are going to disappear because there's a million defenses at this one town, and it's just a nightmare.
So it's something that would leverage the public trust, but at the same time being mindful of the fact that, a new person, bought the game, could still interact. It's not total authority.
That is something I absolutely hate about the scarcity of resources in Foxhole, is because there was this one new player the other day. His name was Excellent, and he was a warrant officer, 1 or 2, I forget. Anyways, he was new, and he had just had his buddy buy the game, and they were going to go to the front with a tank, and they had the RMATs, and they didn't have a lot of fuel, so I told them, listen, go to Apollo's Landing or go to, well, actually, yeah, because he wanted to fight in Farinac, so I said, go to Apollo's Landing / Jade Cove, build your tank there, and then you can just drive to the front, and I guarantee you somebody on the front will give you fuel. And if any new, like, veterans get salty because of the scarcity, but ignoring that part, he was very receptive. He understood how scarcity works. He enjoyed the thought of, oh, my tank is precious and it's not something that can be easily replaced. Well, something happened, and not through him, but through someone I trust who was a colonel, came to me and said, hey, there's this player, he's like new, and he just lost 140 RMATs due to some teleportation issue with going, transferring maps. And so I have a stockpile of RMATs, I said, fine, bring him here, I'll give him 200 RMATs and we can try again. It was the same guy, and he was really cool, and I was more than happy to give him the material to go make his tank, and I gave him a can of petrol so he could drive to the front and he could, do his thing. But they're just, somebody who's really cool, understanding, and nice. I'm more than happy. I don't care if they're brand new. I don't even care if they have a rank, but if they're understanding and nice, You want to go blow up in a tank in 2 seconds? Here, go enjoy yourself. People are going to get pissed at me. Tell them, whatever, I gave you the RMATs. And, you know, a lot of people know who I am, and they're like, well, if Cronus did it, nah, whatever. But then you get the players who just, they go to the refineries, they snipe all the RMATs, they snipe all the RMATs out of the factories, they take them, they build their tank, and then, you know, some of them don't even realize the tank takes petrol and not diesel. And it's like,
right, that's
an education issue.
Yeah, that's the curse of having such an immediately accessible toy box to work with, which is good. We do like that, I guess, to an extent, but the curse of that is you are starting to meddle in things that you have no idea the repercussions of when you are first playing the game, and probably even later on you don't realize it. I don't know, Sir Wolfie, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a whole lot.
I mean, I don't really have an idea on that. I wanted to bounce back, if that's okay. Yeah, so bouncing it really far back is that there's this constant mention about the timers and how they're not fun. And I just want to like point out a thing with logistics, right? Is that the thing is that with time consumption, right? Is that, as I said, my philosophy is that it's very just primitive tasks of just waiting, clicking, and blah blah blah. Like, definitely just gonna say this to Markfoot, which is, like, even if it just took the same amount of time, right? If there was a way to do it mechanically, just make it fun. Heck, just make it like the timers, right? You could just stand there, right? But if there was just some cool animation of sorts, like, heck, even in the refinery, you could just see it melting or just have something cool. Like, for example, like back in Death Harvest, you had the Centaurian. Like, it was just that one thing, but it was just so cool because of its design. And like, yes, people would argue that, oh yeah, it had the cannon, it had 2 HMGs, like it was something more than that, than primitive. But I would just say, like, if it's something just entertaining would be added, because like for me, logistics is like the issue is that number 1, fun, and then number 2 comes the time consumption, right? And then, I mean, well, Colin's probably has something to say about that, but I'm just gonna talk about the Quartermaster's topic. I do agree, like, I thought about the Quartermaster idea, like bringing it back, like before, but like the more I think about it, I feel like it just makes it more linear, like the combat, because when you're making supplies, right, is that you're gonna be supplying fronts like the Quartermasters and such. The problem is that it's like, what if we had, like, or assuming that the same logistics system is as is, right? If you had a Quartermaster, what if you wanted to do like a clan op, right? This is an issue as well, is that a lot of times is that when the clans really want to do the big operations, Infamous A2 DK, right, that's very difficult because, like, as much as, no matter how much you want to do, is that you're gonna need to hoard it. Like, the amount of supplies that you need to make cannot just be made like on the spot in one day. Like, it has to be done gradually, and it's just gonna get stolen eventually. Like, yeah, you can have the op stockpile, but it's like, if you had the Quartermaster, how would you convince the people that, oh, I want to make a clan op, right? But it's like, what if you're like a lower tier clan that people won't vote you in, right? And then they're just not gonna let you do your thing because, oh, he's not really that reputable, he's probably just gonna waste the resources. So I just feel like there's a lot of restriction.
Let me clear up what I mean by the Quartermaster system. Don't remove one system for another, just have both systems, you know? An opt-in system. The Quartermaster system would be an opt-in. You have chosen to drive to this Logi Center and you're giving your resources to a town that is specifically designated to have a Quartermaster in it. And the only thing that the Quartermaster can do in this town that is different than other towns is he can instantly pull from the storage depot. Like, anybody can pull from the storage depot. You still get the timer, but the Quartermaster person would be somebody who can instantly pull from the depot and be able to organize. Like, organizing shipping containers is a nightmare when you're trying to both empty a depot, build stuff at the same time, and you're just looking for space for all this produced material. You know, I end up with some shipping containers that look really weird. Like, I try to coordinate them so, like, it's 1 crate of SMGs to 3 crates of ammo, rifles are a 1-to-1 ratio, shotguns 1-to-1, grenades, and like, you're just trying to coordinate, but it's hard to do when you're doing it all by yourself. And even if you get more people helping you, the most amount of people you can get helping you is another person, because factories are most efficient with 2 people. They're just most efficient. So somebody who is a Quartermaster would be like, these are my factories and I'm going to run them. And maybe it's not even just like one individual. It's like a group. Like you could say, okay, I have BMATs, Wolfie has BMATs, Markfoot has BMATs. You're all on the factory queue list, so you can run the factories efficiently. And like, it's just an easier way for people like me who want to fuel the front. Like I see a place with no shirts, and I'm like, I want shirts. And the only way sometimes to do that is to go out of my way, drive all the way to Great March, and make 4 crates of shirts per 5 minutes, you know. And then I sit there, I can fill a truck, and then I can go to the front. It's just really annoying that I have to leave the refinery and go down there, because it's like, if 1,500 BMATs, it doesn't go very far. It just doesn't go very far. And the fact that vehicle factories are clogged all the time when people are trying to make trucks is like, I try to make sure that the storage depot has 10 trucks in it. I try to make sure the storage depot has 10 motorcycles in it. And I've been trying to make sure that the storage depot has 10 ambulances in it. But convincing 3 people to sit there and help me make that many trucks in a vehicle factory just doesn't work. You know, it's 33 clicks times 10 if you had 3 people doing it. And it becomes this nightmare game of trying to find people who are willing to do something that's probably not as fun. Like, before you could make cranes at town halls, I would have to organize these groups of 10 or 15 cranes, get these people together, and we would drive from Blemish to wherever the hell the cranes were needed. And it was more enjoyable than if I told somebody to do that by themselves, because nobody cares sometimes about the value of an item. Like, there are people who take harvesters, they bring them to a field, they harvest the field, and then when they're done with the field, they leave the harvester there because they have what they want. There are people who take harvesters, and they are now their way of personally hoarding materials. They drive the harvester from a component field to the refinery and back and forth to ensure that they're the ones who get all the components. You know, there's this fine line between hoarding and not hoarding, because there's just no way to stop people from taking RMATs and saying, well, I mean, I personally had almost 20,000 RMATs to myself at one war, you know. That was like war 30-something, 34? No, 34 was Lockheed. I had 20,000 RMATs because a lot of the resource fields were on fishermen's for components. And we didn't have harvesters, and nobody wanted to sit there and mine them, so it was me and my group, and they just brought me the components. I refined them. I was using the exploit, so I never had to worry about the timer running out. And when tanks unlocked, I made 35 tanks. I made like 15 or 20 field artillery pieces. I made 20 gunboats. And, you know, somebody like me with a lot of resources, not a problem. But the problem becomes when somebody else wants a tank and I'm not around. It's like, what do? There's no way for me to leave my resources because there are just greedy players who decide, okay, well, here's a bunch of RMATs. I'm going to take them. I'm going to drive down to somewhere off the radar or where they can't see my truck, and I'm going to leave the truck here with a bunch of RMATs, and when I come on, they'll be there later. And so then people get upset.
Yeah, so the problem isn't necessarily that don't have the ability to share your resources. You can do that easy just through the inherent things of the game. The problem is that if you do leave it like that, you almost consider it lost just because it's defaulted to the fact that someone will not know what they're doing, someone will not know the value of what they're doing.
No, I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about specifically the greedy players. I'm talking about the players who... There was this one guy who we had issues with a couple of wars ago. I won't say names, but what he did is he took a whole bunch of RMATs, like 900 of them, didn't farm them, didn't do anything. He just took them, and he put them in a box somewhere. And when I found the box, he got really pissed off, and I was like, dude, you're not using them. You're on the front line shooting people with a rifle, and their light tanks are deployed. And he's like, well, I want a battle tank. And I was like, I'll leave you the material needed for a battle tank, but right now we need RPGs, we need machine guns. And what he started doing was he would go around and just take RMATs from anyone then, and then he would take tanks, lock them, put them in a freighter, and then drive out into the middle of the ocean, and he would go back with a speedboat later to get it. And it's like, I understand you want your personal property, but this is when you were waiting 8 hours for RMATs, and I, I couldn't find a flatbed to save my life. It's like, I need these to make flatbeds. I need machine guns. There are tanks, and I have no RPG tubes. What do you want me to do? You know, scarcity also brings up the issue of people fighting over these resources that are rare because, you know, everybody wants to do their own thing, and if there's no possibility for them to do their own thing, they just get angry, and it's really sad. It's like, I try and give away as many RMATs as I can get, but at the same time, I need to hold a reserve of RMATs, because if I log in to do logistics and I say, hey guys, how many flatbeds we have, and I hear 3 and I've got 10 guys, it's like, well, here, I'll make more, and then a guy shows up, takes a flatbed, puts an armored car on it, drives it to the front, and I just never see it again. And it happens with field machine guns, it happens with field artillery, and it's like this most basic resource of a flatbed becomes so rare and scarce because nobody wants to spend 30 RMATs on building one, because if you spend 30 RMATs on building one and you have your personal queue, right, you end up having to pull 100 RMATs, so you have 70 left over that are no longer in your queue that you can't put back, so people would sooner go around and take them.
I think that brings us back. I know exactly where we're headed, because you can give us example after example. I think that will bring us back here to. We might close out with this. I don't know where you can certainly redirect any of you, but I think that brings us back to update 26, right? The infamous update 26. Mark, and the topic of scarcity. Mark, you had mentioned earlier in the very beginning when you were giving your spiel about things you'd like to see. Correct me. Things like you'd want to expand on for update 26, or things to mitigate the effects of update 26. You know, without spilling anything you don't want to, can you give us some insight onto what direction you want that to go in?
Yeah, I kind of missed a bit of that question, but I think I got the gist of it.
Sure,
you're asking where we want to expand on update 26. Is that the general question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that what we always wanted is the ability to have players being able to have a bit more of a sense of a progression as in your logi game, right? As the war goes on, and we did that with some stuff, but with things that didn't have a lot of like player agency, right? Like, okay, as things move along, eventually you get the harvest, like eventually you get a sledgehammer, and then eventually you get a harvester. Eventually, you like things like the freighter as an example, right? Like eventually you can have more bandwidth in your water logi. But I think a lot of these are very static, and there's not a lot of player-led agency. It's not like the base building stuff that we have right now, where you can decide I want to go into Callahan's Passage or like whatever region, right, and make like a huge like defensive line as an example, right? We want logi players to be able to, so like the actual game of having to gather resources, and that these resources are strategic to some degree. That whole part, and also the lack of the port bases, right? So there's no magical like port bases. That's sort of like that's like sandbox aspect to the logi game that we introduced in update 26. We want to keep that. We want to keep the strategic resources. We don't want to bring back the port bases.
Yes.
We like the tactile feeling of things like the cranes and the shipping containers. So those are the things that we want to keep, right? But what we want to add on that, sort of like the missing element, is that we want players to be like, okay, we have all these really raw things, but let's say I look at the landscape of the map, right? If I look at the layout of this map, I can visualize at the beginning, this is the optimal logi routes that I want to build out, right? This is like the well-oiled machine that I want to build in the next week or two, right? And that the goal is by the end of the first week, or like whatever, you eventually start to see that like well-oiled machine start working, and then you can take a step back, and hopefully you built it with a whole bunch of other players, because we don't want it to be like a solo game. But you want to be able to be like, hey, look at this machine that I built. It's running at an optimal efficiency now. Sort of like the example, like there's obviously like pie in the sky, and totally like a conceptual thing. So this, it's not something that we're making. It's not like a concrete thing that we're making, but it's more like if you're able to, let's take like the waterology side, right? If you're able to say, okay, in the first day, all I have is a shipyard. I have to like go and like drive a crane over and just like, I have to use a barge. Super primitive, right? But if like by the end of the first week, right, you have like a harbor there with a port with a whole bunch of like static cranes. You have this whole operation going, and now you're able to leverage. That's part of like the well-oiled machine, right? So that's the stuff that like we want to add in, right?
I would love harbors. There are so many places where I want to use waterology, but it's just like I can't get a crane there. I can't even organize anything. Like doing like something that kind of annoys me, and I think is a really big issue with the balance of the map, by the way, is Viper's Pit is mirrored to Shackled, and Viper's Pit has a harbor that is amazing, and it's got 2 factories versus the one in Shackled, and it makes me mad. It makes me mad. And also, Weathered Harbor, or that Port of Rune or whatever, is a straight drive down in a freighter over then like into Endless, where if you were to try to do the same thing from Westgate, it's Westgate, you have to go all the way around that peninsula, go under that bridge, and then all the way back around, and it increases the amount of time, and it makes me so angry, and I give the Colonials the North now. Just give us the North.
I don't know if that can necessarily happen. Sir, what were you about to say?
So many things.
Sir, what were you about to say?
I always think it would be cool if I could just do logistics in the home region.
Oh, don't even get me started on that.
Just in my own little personal world and able to ship things in. Like, okay, we live in a weird world right now where
I have to fight for everything.
Yeah, you're fighting over the place that you're producing things. I don't remember any time in World War II, well, except for maybe Russia and Germany, but
Russia got to move on.
United States, we shipped stuff across. We were like, oh yeah, here you go, have some more stuff. Woo! And the person in the factory had never seen a bullet except for the one that he made.
Sorry, there's something that I do want to stick in there. Like, so the original plan of the revamp of the home regions was not to just make like prettier, and like the plan about why we like revamped it, but again we like ran out of time, is we want the home regions to be a part of the world, right? And it always comes up that question, should you be able to run logic from your home region? But then that always brings up the second question was, is it vulnerable then? And if it is not vulnerable, then we're back to having like a port base, right? So this is the yeah. So if you guys have any ideas about that'd be kind of cool.
So imagine, you can control as the developers how much material can be brought out of the home region. If let's say it's invulnerable, let's say it's a port base, because I have no idea what those are because I've never played with port bases. If there's only one salvage field there, like if there's currently the amount of salvage and like mines on the home island as there is now, that is a limiting factor to how much can be produced. And then, if you had 2 people do the farming and then they're splitting the resources. And don't forget that you also have the issue of getting it to, like, let's say Westgate. Let's say if you hooked up the 2 areas and then you brought, well, you're not going to bring trucks. That's pointless. If in the current system you bring like containers worth of material, so that material still has to find a home somewhere. And the only thing that's really nice about the home island, which is if you kept the refinery exploit in, is these people would be forced to, make their tanks and everything and not have to worry about, waking up to somebody taking all the resources or something, because it's a safe place where you can sort of just sit and chill, make your tank, and then just go to the front by bringing it via barge or something. So that would be fine. And if it was vulnerable to attack, the day someone starts harrying a spawn is the day Foxhole Discord has a really bad day again. So I like it both ways, but at the same time, you just had to remove gas Howie shells because there's not enough filters in a filter crate to make, my life happy. There's a balance between the amount of stuff sent in a shipping container and how much time it takes to put it somewhere useful.
So my question is, why does it have to be vulnerable? Why does logistics have to have this weird sense of vulnerability? Like it's just a weird, it's almost it's a gaming thing to require, I guess.
So my question is, if you didn't have that sense of vulnerability, right? Besides the magical element, right? Besides the fact that in a real war, sure, technically speaking, you should be able to travel there and attack it. But putting that aside, right? But then what makes it? Why don't you just play a game like Factorial at that point, right? It's probably a much better logistics-based game. A single player. Because is it just a single-player game at that point, sort of? Not necessarily a single-player game, but it's not a PvP game then, right?
There's still aspects that need to happen. There's still a level of interaction that's in the big picture. Like RuneScape. RuneScape is a personal storyline and rarely ever touches stuff that other people are doing until a late game. You don't go out and kill people in the first 10 minutes of playing RuneScape. It's rarely ever the thing until you get to that point, or you don't even have to touch that point. There was a discussion that was had a long time ago. Myself, Max, and I think someone else was present. I can't remember who. It might have been Duke Salt. We were talking about, this is back when skirmishes were a thing, and we were talking about how it would be cool if everything was joined together in some way. During skirmishes, you could have lots of people in the home region producing things to prepare for the next war. You could also support the skirmishes. The items that were the rewards from the skirmishes could be brought back to the home region, carried through to the next war, or whatever. You had this back and forth. This level of integration that meant it was truly actually part of the world. And now, of course, skirmishes don't really exist, I guess. So, but there's no reason why you can't have this startup period, because all these people are still going off to play combat shooty skirmish mode or practice mode. But you can still have lots of people doing this ramp up, right? We would do it. It's to make no mistake, we would enjoy it. But you still have to get this somewhere, right? And if I could have a big freighter, a beefy freighter, it would be just super cool to load up many crates. And I mean many cargo containers stacked up, take the time to organize it, and bring it up, pull it up to a docks in the main world. And
I have a story for that.
It would just be that would just be fun, cool, and low risk, low blood pressure. And it's just relaxing. You could still communicate, and you could still say, okay, we're planning for an op, we could do this, and maybe there could be some other limitations. And I never understood why the shift to region-based specialties, in that this place is the only one that has this one has the only one that has this. I actually dislike that big time, because it created that driving back and forth that it becomes a little much. I want a more specialty in this place is the best at this, but you're not limited to doing it, and that could fall into play in the home region. Maybe you're doing it at 75% of the rate, and maybe you can't gather tech parts there, because that would just be weird and game breaking. But you can't do this. You're limited to materials and limited to things that you can carry. Maybe you can't bring vehicles. Or maybe that you can only bring vehicles are really heavy, and shipping a vehicle compared to a container is a bit much. But there's no way there's no reason why you can't create these reasonable limitations and make it so that this home region becomes useful. And it would be really cool, I think, from a tutorial perspective, especially 1.0 hits, you have all these people doing these tutorials, and maybe you get to the point where this is how you scrap, this is how you do this is how you produce things. Hop on this ship, take your boat that you just made, take that across the ocean. You are there. You're in the world. Cue cutscene or whatever happens. This whole like breaking people into the war and getting rid of potentially. I know it's painful for people that want to get to the front line more, but imagine getting rid of spawning into the world. You're there. You log in. You go there. Maybe you have someone who's got a ferry going across, and you want to go to the backlands. That's how you get there. But in order to get to spawn to the main world, you paradrop in or whatever. You can create this less gamey, less map. Click this button, look at the blinky lights. There's so much that you can do if the home region was truly integrated.
And would it be open to attack?
Nah, there's no reason for that. And that almost defeats the purpose of a tutorial. Honestly, it is the place where a player comes to and learns, right? And yeah, you could do that in some instance, tutorial world, I guess. But I think it could be just happy little port base, and it wouldn't have a lot of the same things about port bases. You wouldn't be able to maybe build buildings, right? You wouldn't be able to do all these, very port basey min-maxy things. You're there, you get your stuff, you get out, or you're there, you produce stuff, you send it out. All it does is it takes the Logi person, puts them somewhere where they can just monotonously do the thing that they wanted to do this entire time, but also it makes that useful,
I mean,
So-
if I may,
Damn it. All right.
yeah, if I may just comment on that, I mean, I actually believe that that's actually a really cool idea because, whenever I get into Foxhole, I just click deploy and then just go in and click on the small point of the map. It doesn't really have that feeling that this is a special thing. I'm gonna go in, but no, it's with this, it's you just have all the masses of players, right? And you're just in this one big ship, and then you're just deploying. Everyone's going in, and they all spread out. The sheer spectacle of everyone just doing their thing. Everyone's a cog in the machine is just something that I believe is an idea that has been lost recently, with all these issues, because as much as it I love this idea of having the spectacle of everyone being a cog, right? There's just the issue of time zones and everyone's just not being on at the same time. But I'm just going off something irrelevant there, but the point I want to say is that I actually wanted to argue while that is a really cool idea, I mean, wouldn't it cause the same problem as supply caches, which is if you're able to do logic during home region, or is that only for start of war? I mean, yeah, even if it was start of war, wouldn't that cause the same issue as supply caches? Because war is with all the current systems and the grind, it takes a lot out of people, right? And people just want to take a break, right? And if you introduce this system, it's kind of you're forcing people back in to just meet the other side's power. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
I guess supply caches were dumb. I never liked them.
I like it.
There's a lot of things that were just, I could say a lot of things were just dumb, but supply caches were just one of those things that the only purpose to serve was to say, you did all this work, we're going to give you some fictional reward, here you go, this is how we're going to give it to you, or whatever it ended up being. This is how you can progress across the different feud wars. And there's no reason why you don't have a home region reset before the next war, but you can, skirmish happens, home region reset, everything is just gone, and then you go into the skirmish and you keep going or whatever it is. But I don't think stockpiling would be the thing. As long as you had some type of reset or whatever it is, it just, that's fine. That's good enough to get rid of everything that would have been stockpiled. And it gives you one of the best things that the old weekly wars gave was a date and a time. I always said that the best thing about the weekly wars was a date and time. It gave something for clans and competitive minds to focus on, and having a set. This is going to be the point that you restart. You have the next 2 days of skirmish to do whatever you want in the home regions, whatever. Both sides would do it. It's not like you're going to be mismatched because you have more people doing it. Everyone's going to do it. Let's be honest. You have these 2 days of ramp up. This exciting logistics. Like, oh, this is our time to shine. We can get everything going, and it's not really going to amount to much. But then the war starts. The invasion happens, and everyone starts hops in their freighters, and you have these fleets of ship going across. And unloading of supplies, and the war is just on, right? Like that build up, and just boom, here we go, action's happening. But you still have to unload it and do all the other logistics things, and then you perform logistics there because it makes more sense because it's closer. You're doing it there. You want the best, the fastest way of doing logistics. You do it as close to the front as possible, right? That's what was important about capturing oil fields during the wars. Is you captured this oil field, you shorten your supply line. That had a tangible benefit. But there's still room for that super back end thing, and I think the whole issue of port bases. And for Kronus, you didn't experience port bases, but it was just a little base with a bunch of walls around it, and this is where you spawned in your region, right? And it was painful because it tried to be a logi center, whilst becoming the primary spawn point that was assaultable for the enemy team. And I think that separation is what actually needed to happen. Is your spawn point into the world should be separated from your entry point into the war. And that's where that if you had that separation where that wasn't the case, you could land anywhere you wanted into the war. You make your own beachhead, so to speak. Right. You could walk around and flank, do what you need to do to take care of that, securing that town if you absolutely had to. By then the war is over, let's be honest. But
yeah. But once Logi finally has enough equipment to do Logi things, usually the war is coming to an end, because the moment you're able to farm components is the moment you're able to start producing things. And eventually you do reach a point where there's just so many flatbeds that no matter what, you're going to find flatbeds. But now flatbeds have become the hot new item of destroying trenches, and people like to put people on the back of them, and they like charging into the fray and use them as like shooting bunker things that last 3.5 seconds. But I have two things to say about freighters that are super amazing and made them super fun, but they still feel a little was we used to use freighters. Like one time freighters were delivering a ton of supplies from Fisherman's to Fearmore because storage depot. We have to use storage depots. Without storage depots, shipping containers are just absolute. Anyways. So what happened was my friend who was working Fisherman's and running the factory had like 3-4 filled freighters, but the waterway wasn't safe. So I told him, bring the material down to Westgate, and we'll unload them, we'll put them in, and I'll get my driving crews on it, and we'll move them to the front. And the operation behind moving those freighters, getting 4 freighters to park into that harbor, and then have all the cranes, and then trying to fit the drivers, getting them on and off, and organizing the logistics behind it, and then putting the containers down in the field, like where the big open area is in front of the refinery. That was so much fun because, we're working together, we're doing something really cool, then we're getting a fleet of flatbeds together, and they're all going to the place, and you put all the stuff in the storage depot, and it was a lot of fun, and it was hectic. And then, we're using fleets and fleets of freighters to move tons of supplies from... This was a different war, of course. We were in Tempest, and we had tons of containers, but we had actually filled the Lockheed storage depot to the point where it was just absolutely full. Like, you couldn't fit. We had 60,000 BMATs sitting around in shipping containers, and the hardest part of trying to use shipping containers when the storage depot was full, because there was no other storage depots that we could use, was trying to tell people, listen, there are shipping containers here on the map. Go to them. It's everything you could ever want. And it was just shipping, it was just container after container of grenades, rifles, everything you could need for a frontline combat. And it was fun. And then you were talking, sir, about like doing Logi in the home region and how Logi should be in more places, and I disagree with that. Mostly because the closer you get a Logi center to the front, the less burnout your team will have. Every town in Foxhole, like every town that exists, if it had a factory in it, that would be eh. It's the refineries that really hurt because, BMATs make everything. Like, it would be really nice if more like in a north-south fight, it'd be nice if there was more Logi centers, because the biggest issue I've been having is just trying to do my own work when, okay, Blemish is full. There's I took a screenshot of it the other day. There was 0 BMATs, 0 EMATs. There was nothing in the refinery besides diesel and 1 can of crude oil. And everybody was just sitting there waiting for BMATs. And I'm like, you guys could go farm the salvage fields that are up, and nobody wanted to. They just sat there waiting for someone else to do it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm leaving. I can't do anything because the factories were cranking and people were making more blood plasma. That's why there's 6,600 blood plasma in the safe house in Blemish, because just one guy is taking all the BMATs to make fucking blood plasma, and there's already 100 crates in the goddamn storage depot. Kron is mad. Kron wants stuff.
He
just wants to make shipping containers worth of stuff to bring it to the front. But no, this guy's got to make more blood plasma.
No, we gotta make war crimes. No, but in all seriousness, though.
Everybody was gonna vote kick the guy, but it's he's not really breaking any rules. He's just being a dick. I don't know. Whatever. I just left. I don't like dealing with that shit.
Yeah, something that I really want to know is I just want to bounce back a bit, right? On the issue, or not the issue, but the idea of doing logistics in your home base, right? Is that two questions I had in relation to this is that the time between wars is just too short, right? At least in what?
I'm just going to interrupt you right there because it's not too short. It's too short for people like us who play too much. It's not too short for the guy who's not playing and he goes to log on and it's oh, there's no war today because we ended it. It's so when's the next one? Oh, a week from now? It's no.
Well, I think
can
they
see
have
why
to
the
be
developers
dynamic.
don't do that.
Right, they should be dynamic to an extent. Thoughts. I'm going to say something here. Just get your reactions. Wars can end at any time.
Yeah, war could end right now. We could all be sitting here talking, and all of a sudden, I don't know.
Wars could end before gunboats are introduced, and everything after that.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
We had the 2-day war back in July. It was a 2 or 3 day war because nobody logged on, and it was just a steamroll from one side. The wardens just went through, and the Colonials just didn't log on. The thing is that people complain that there needs to be a longer break between wars, but my answer to that is the same thing. We're the odd people who play Foxhole way too much. It's as much as you don't want your team to lose, it's just you gotta sit down and go, well, I played this war, well, better not play the next, or maybe just play a day or two, and if we lose, we lose. It's a game in a war. It doesn't mean much.
Something I definitely want to know is that, the problem is that, as all of us can agree on, is that, the time consumption on some, if not most, of the process is just, it is a lot, right? And then for a player to need... What?
I was going to just say, I'm a terrible example of why Logi and Foxhole... I'm a great example of why Logi and Foxhole takes too long. It's just too long to get people together, to get anything done, to get, to farm... you can only have 4 people at a salvage field with sledgehammers before it's crowded. 2 harvesters at a field is too much once you have that going. And, the thing with Logi is as it progressively gets easier, you unlock sledgehammers, it just became a lot easier and faster, but it also, instead of having 5, 6 to 8 people at a field, splitting the resources, it turns into 4 people at most can have the resources out of the field. And once you get the harvesters are like the best worst thing, because you have one person who clears an entire component field by himself, and it's all in his personal queue, and it's like, well, there's 750 RMATs I'll never see again. The worst days are when I log on and I have no RMATs. Those are the worst days, because then I don't have flatbeds. Like, I drive around with a motorcycle, I look for flatbeds, I grab one, and then I drive back. And then, it's been 20, 30 minutes of my life for a single flatbed, and then I go play Mordhau. I'm going to go swing a sword at someone, because I'm not going to spend 40 minutes of my life just trying to set up the most basic logi shit.
Real quick, we have crossed the 2-hour mark, so I don't know if anyone has to go, or if anyone... I can go for another hour, just to be honest with you. But of course, certainly, I don't want to take up anyone's personal time beyond this. However, I think...
I want to get more from Markfoot. He's too quiet.
Yeah.
Hey, he can't spill anything.
I'm angry.
He's got to toe the line. But I will say,
he ain't got no line here. I will throw him.
Let me choose. I've been kind of letting it I've been letting the conversation organically play out. Let me just throw something down on here. And I will start off with Markfoot again in that case, I guess. But in terms of driving, the trucking aspect, Mark, what are your thoughts on? And I'll tie this to driving. What are your thoughts on people feeling like they have to have a podcast or music in the background to play Foxhole? What are your thoughts on that? And specifically, I guess, also just the length of time driving and complaints about driving. What are your reactions to that?
Yeah, there's. I think that there probably is a bit too much driving. Just as sort of like to start there. I think that what we want to do, though, is provide, now that we are, because I think we have to also take a step back and realize that this is work in progress, right? So like this game is still being made, and if we were to just suddenly say,
teleportation,
like trucks are 3 times as fast, just as like a simple example, right? That leaves no room for any of these other cool things later on, right? It leaves no room for these other, all that stuff I was, I was talking about, like having room for players to be able to like build up, right? It's like, but at the same time, I get it. I get that, like, there's probably too much driving in the game. So it's a little bit of like patience, and it's a little bit of like, maybe we can try to like alleviate things in other parts of the grind that we don't think need to be there now or ever.
I'd like to interject a little bit about the driving thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I like the fact... okay, let me word this carefully. Driving is a necessary time delay to make sure that wars are not played by basically saying, okay, here's a truck full of grenades, go blow up the enemy. Here's a truck full of grenades, go blow up the enemy. Driving is a necessary evil in Foxhole, but it does feel a little overbearing because there's no intermediate. There's no reason for someone in a flatbed who's delivering stuff to... Like, the reason we deliver stuff to storage depots is to stop people from going from Blemish to the front. It's go from the storage depot to the front. That's the whole point of doing storage depots, in my opinion. It's to save time on the frontline drivers. They're the frontline drivers, I'm the backline logi, and I'm trying to save them time by making sure they're always full on resources. There needs to be more intermediates. Like, you don't have to do 30 minutes of driving, but if you do 10 minutes of driving, now somebody else only has to do 10 minutes of driving, and another person only has to do another 10 minutes of driving. It would be really cool if there was a way to do intermediates, like a resource hub in areas where you could just pull up and like you could back your flatbed up under this like resource depository that just dumps resources into your resource container, and then you can drive it to a refinery because somebody's already taken the time to load up this resource depository with tons of material, but they just didn't feel like going from like Great March to Blemish or Great March to Shackle. That's what I would like, because if I could just instantaneously get everything, I would probably get so bored of just being... sometimes you get bored being too rich of material, like you have all this material and you don't know what to do with it. Like, if I could log on every day with 100,000 BMATs without even having to worry about it, it probably wouldn't be as enjoyable.
Yeah, so I think that one thing that we definitely plan for, and it's good to hear that it's at least working to some degree. If maybe it's like a niche, like it's working in like a niche manner, but that was always the point of the storage depots. That's why in update 26, the whole philosophy behind them, which is, again, separate from how well it's working, but the motivation for them, right, was that we didn't expect there to be this much amount of, we weren't expecting your truck drivers to be driving all the way back from the Blemish all the way to the front line, right? Our expectation was that maybe you were doing that on the first day, right? Maybe you're doing that on the first day. But then eventually, when you get your flatbed trucks going, you're able to like mass dump a bunch of stuff at a storage depot in between the Blemish and the front. And then the frontline drivers, the expectations was that frontline drivers were only supposed to be driving about like a region or so. And I actually wish that I had time to go back and like pull up the we made a whole bunch of like mock-up maps on like, okay, this is where the flatbed trucks are supposed to be going to. This is where the frontline drivers are supposed to be going to. And in the same way, the freighters were supposed to work that way. So like freighters are supposed to be able to dump a massive amount of things to a frontline storage depot, and then a frontline truck driver goes from that storage depot to the actual front, right? So like if we can succeed in the future, that's definitely more of how it should look, right? Like
that's how I want to use storage depots. That's how I've always wanted. But like I've said earlier, there are storage depots you can't use because they just get sniped. Like Colonial side, I'm constantly suffering from, hey guys, we just filled up Mercy's Wish. There's one gunboat. And then someone drives up and taps it, so they make it even worse. Prairie Bazaar, gunboat. Lock and Berth is mostly for the wardens, but again, you drive one gunboat up there, boom, it's gone. Wellchurch, boom, it's gone. I don't know. I don't think I can't say that word. Estate, I don't think that one can get hit. Fisherman's can get hit, so that's gone. There's just a lot of places where I just refuse to use these storage depots because it's impossible. That's why I've always been yelling at Nuba, let me build storage depots, because I'll build them inland where I don't have to worry about a gunboat. Indirect fire weapons are the most overpowered piles of
Well, and to add to the whole driving thing, I've always been interested in the life cycle of a BMAT. And I say that because it's when you add in driving, like driving from the old times used to be driving from your Logi center to wherever you needed to make a delivery, right? Like that was your primary, driving. But the life cycle of a BMAT is not that. The life cycle of a BMAT is getting scrapped. You're going into the truck gets to the refinery dumps, sits there for a while, it gets dumped into a storage of some sort, or directly into a production. It goes from production to storage to storage, driven all the way up. But then there's also the time it takes for you to create that life cycle, right? You are driving to scrap field 1, and you're going to scrap field 2. You're doing this back and forth because you have to do that. So the accumulation of timers in addition to the driving is what becomes that much more painful. It amplifies the issue. It really should be, one or the other, right? You can't dedicated driver people have no problem doing driving. And even on long hauls, like, you have people who like 20 minutes is still not that much in the grand scheme of a 8-hour play session for some of these insane people, but it's more painful for someone who is trying to do it solo or in a smaller group, where your accumulation of timers and waiting, and I chalk driving up to waiting, because it went from an exploratory, I'm going to see the world and pass by all these cool things, all these defenses along the way, to an actual very intent. You have to have a lot of intent in driving from one side of the road to the other. regardless if you're driving halfway there to do a Logi Center or somewhere else.
But what about ambush gameplay?
That actually affected me about 40, 50 minutes ago. I have been playing on and off this entire time, and
I heard the clicking. We all heard it.
Yeah, clicking and typing, and I've been multitasking. So I got ambushed. Plain and simple. People pop out of the bush in a place that they should not have been in the first place, and that's fine. I actually never have an issue with partisans, right? Except because driving is such an intent-based thing that you have to dedicate 20 minutes to your whole trip, or 10 minutes, you just lost the timers that go into the materials, the vehicles, your blood pressure, like everything else. It was just lost in one tiny, insignificant moment. And that's painful, rage-inducing, and the way you used to recover from that was, I'll just take a couple people up there to clear it out, or some of the combat dudes up there to clear it out, and then I'm going to prepare another shipment. That shipment, the life cycle of the BMATs that go into that shipment might be,
forever.
So many hours of waiting for everything, including the materials that go into
EMATs and RMATs.
Yeah, the RMATs, and I say life cycle BMAT. Yeah, the other resources that go into it. The entire process to recover from even something like that. Maybe that was you're delivering explosives in order to take care of whatever is attacking you or whatever. But especially if you have this in a shipping container, you have your shipping container that just went away, and you go, I can learn one of those. Okay, I got to make another flatbed. Okay.
There's too many steps for one person. Too many steps for one person. It's a team-based game, but for one person, just waking up and saying, I want to do anything.
So the cost effectiveness, you're saying the cost effectiveness and the risks involved, that it's not balanced. It's not necessarily something inherently wrong with partisans being able to function. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, it is.
I still disagree with that, actually.
12 RMATs and you blow up one harvester. Boom. Make Logi mad.
It's just a lopsided pain point. It's minor. It is incredibly minor in the grand scheme of things, but it is incredibly painful when it does happen. And it should be. It actually should be, to a point.
But it's way too much.
In the grand effect, when you've already been battling the mental fatigue that is Euro Truck Simulator, and I actually call it Golf Cart Simulator because it is. I use this analogy all the time. You in golf, you whack the ball, you get in the cart. Whack the ball, you get in the cart, and you repeat this 18 times. And that's what resource gathering has become because of the lack of the endless gathering. And I know it's a seemingly irrelevant thing, and there's a reason for it. It's just when you have, but systems don't like to stop at all. When you have a gathering team that's out there, you have to stop. Get in your truck, do this. Stop. Get in your truck, do this. And you might be ping-ponging back and forth, and then you find out that your crane went off on a mission somewhere,
No, don't talk about cranes.
Yeah, when one piece of the puzzle goes wrong, it is such a more disruptive effect than it used to be. We can't put a crane on a flatbed. We can't drive a crane up, because it takes a year. You can't fly one, and you can't paradrop a crane. That would be silly. But it becomes painful when one thing goes wrong because the whole process is painful. And this is why I think that driving itself is an incredibly useful timer. But when it's coupled with other timers in the process, and I think that maybe the factory timer I never actually had a problem with. It was the addition of the other timers, the resource timer, which creates this stoppage in the system. It becomes a painful point. And that's why driving becomes a chore. I'm no longer driving to just deliver stuff in the front line, which is one of the most gratifying things to be able to do for a Logi driver is to be like that hero that brings stuff up, you know, like you get the commends, you know, it's very gratifying. It's got that. It's just when you don't get the chance to do that as frequently, or you're having to do other things in between, the value of that gratification, which in a MMO that has no personal progression, is really the only thing that you have other than glory. It is, you know,
my Logi drivers love seeing a storage depot get filled. Like, they don't. My Logi. So when I'm playing the Quartermaster role, I'm filling shipping containers. You know, I can have upwards of 45. I think the most amount of shipping containers I ever have filled once, because I had 0 drivers, was back when nobody knew who I was, and I had like 65 of them sitting on Ore Breaker with just material. Like, I had been nonstop running the factory. You know, you can't leave the factory. If it runs cold, you're losing efficiency. I found a group of 3 people who were like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And then I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and they had delivered like half of the field to the front. And it was all the way to Fear More from Ore Breakers, because it was an east-west fight, and they were having a blast because they didn't have to go through the process of making the material. You know, we split the time among, I make the material, I fill the container. I had another person making containers for me, and it wasn't bad. You know, the time was split. But if you don't find these people who are willing to do these insane things, you're screwed. I'm lucky I have somebody named Easy42 that works with me, and I don't know if Markfoot remembers the pictures, or if he was there for that when the Colonials won a war, and in Westgate we had like 150 trucks that we were going to use for an operation, but the war ended, so we just took all the trucks and piled them together and made this giant mess of trucks and just broke the game's physics and engines, and we put trucks on top of the refinery, we put trucks on top of every building in Westgate, and it was the funnest thing we ever did. But, you know, there are people out there who will sit there and hammer away for 3 hours making over 100 fucking trucks, and it's ridiculous. But like, I always go through the thought process of, what if we removed a timer? What if refinement was instantaneous? Would people be more obligated to share resources? Would they be happier to be like, oh, here's some EMATs? Like, EMATs are some of the biggest things that disappear, or that nobody makes because they take too long to make, and everybody needs BMATs. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if all your resource fields are empty and they haven't respawned, that's really upsetting, because it also makes the people who are scrapping go, well, I've got nothing to do, so I'm logging off, because there are people who only want to scrap. It'd be really cool as if there was a system in place where, okay, every salvage field is empty, we're going to respawn one instantaneously. It would incentivize people to clear salvage fields all the time, but of course, then it favors the team with a dedicated Logi team who's like, okay, we cleared a field, we're going to keep clearing them. Okay, 3 fields are back, let's clear those. But at the same time, it encourages people to keep playing what they're playing. And, you know, it's just like, what if we removed this timer? What if we made the factories run more like the refinery? You know, everybody gets their own personal queue. Would that create too many resource issues on the front? You know, because if you had 10 people working a factory, that's more efficient than, you know, one guy working a factory. You know, you could put out 10 times as much shirts. I think the math behind it is you can put out 40-ish crates of shirts an hour if you alone are working at max efficiency in a factory. So, you know, that's an extra 400 shirts to the front. But when you have big wars like this, the average front is using 450 to 480 shirts an hour, and it's like, I can't make enough shirts. And that's on top of the fact is if you're out of BMATs or somebody's not sharing BMATs, and it becomes this game of, well, why aren't you sharing? Why are you hoarding? Why aren't you doing this? And it's like, well, I'm hoarding a little bit because I only have a couple of hours to be on. And then I want to get resources so that the next day I get on, I can do Logi and have fun. Because technically the most efficient way to play Logi is make something, turn it into something, and then get it to the front. And there's no reason to save. But then you're just playing a game of, I spent my time farming, I don't get to use the BMATs, somebody else is. And then you log off, and then you repeat the process. And it's just not as fun. Where there are people like me who like to do the Quartermaster. There's my friend Iron Warrior. He does nothing but build. He built Shackled, he built Blemish, he built defenses in a whole bunch of other places. All he does is build, and sometimes he likes to be a partisan, and that's good fun for him. But there are people who want to play a role, but it's hard for them to play a role because it takes hours and hours and hours of just getting enough BMATs to be a builder. It takes hours and hours and hours of just farming resources to have enough to say I can make a couple of grenades. And like, I do a lot. Like, I pretty much live in front of a factory when I'm playing Foxhole, and there are times where I just give up trying to run a factory because there's so many people trying to do their own thing. It also makes me wonder how many people aren't doing Logi just because they don't have enough time to do it, or because there's just not enough for them to, do what I'm doing, where I'm building shipping containers, filling them, sending them to the front, and just trying to get everybody supplied. And then it's time, like Sir said. Everything eats so much time that some people just get burned out and they don't want to play. Like, the average round time trip we timed this for a flatbed to go from Blemish to Loggerhead is 23 minutes. To go from Blemish to Loggerhead to back. And that's to also unload your container and reload it.
Mark,
just going to Lockheed is an additional 7 minutes on that round trip.
Real quick, Mark, and then we'll go to Wolfie. Mark, I just want to touch in with you. Did you have you in the 2.5 hours that we've been talking? Is there anything like that's been revealed to you? Like, have you like really learned a perspective, or is all of this like, yep, that's another one that we know?
I think that what's actually surprised me is that talking to you guys, I actually feel like I'm much more on the same page with this feedback than I thought there would be, which is a positive thing. Like, I would say like 90% of the things that have been said, I'm sort of like, yeah, I definitely hear you, and like, I agree with you. Whether or not there's a straightforward path to a solution is another sort of issue, but I agree with the feedback.
And of course, it's only 3 of us, 3 or 4 of us in here, so it's not in any way a definitive sample size. That's never what this was going to be. But I can't cram 100 people in here talking at once. Right. Wolfie, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to say, like, to emphasize on like the whole issue about like how many, or like Cronus said, how many people are not doing Logi because of the time. It's like, at the same time, if you think about it, like, I don't think there's just much reward. Like, we know there's not much reward in the process, but what I mean is that, like, there isn't an intermediate reward. Like, okay, you delivered like scrap to a refinery. Like, that's what you do for an hour if you don't have that much time. You just scrap a field, you give it to someone like Cronus. It's like, yeah, your job is done, right? But the thing is that, like, there isn't really much reward. Like, there's no, like, let alone that's not fun, right? It's like, it's just not rewarding. Yeah, but like, sure, you have stockpile value, right? But like, what I would say is that, like, you just don't see it. There is the end result, right? It's like, I just feel like the system is just all about the end, and that may be like controversial, but like, for me, that it just really feels like that. Is that, you can make like a bunch of crates, you can scrap for hours and hours, right? But I just don't feel like, unless you see the end result, it would be much gratifying. Like, for example, something that I really feel like that was forgotten, like, within the world of Foxhole, is like I said this before, which is the idea that is like every person the cog in the machine. It's like, you don't get to see, like, if someone would probably think that, I would see that spectacle. It's like, I'm going to this town, I see these guys doing this, I see these guys building. It's like, at least when you're driving, there's like something that's happening that's like, like, this is happening, this is interesting, right? Like, you learn some information here and there. Like, there's at least like these little bits, right? And that was something that I feel like happened like in the old map, the old 11 map. Now, I'm just going to say this, is that I didn't play as much as I did, nearly as much as I did on the old maps, but like, I just felt that it was that way, and I just want to get my points out before I end this off, is that, or what I have to say is that, on the participation issue, is that, like, I already said this, but it's just that the intermediate, the intermediates between the players, is that I just feel like the communication system, again, that there just needs to be a way for you to get the players to do that, but like, to have each player do like 10 minutes of driving, right? Or have like each player here, so then they like divide the driving time, right? But the problem is that, like, it isn't fun. Like, you're just holding W, whatever, primitive task. And at the same time is that there's also the communication issue, which is like the chat's cluttered and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and at the same time, compare it to something like combat. It's like, okay, I don't have all the time in the world. It's like, why should I just station at a place for like 10 minutes, right? Wait for someone to come in, take a shipment, take it someplace, right? Probably going to be wasted by some randoms. And then...
Yeah, but that's not necessarily always true, because I found, like, when people join my logistics group, they say, hey, how can I help? And I say, well, I don't tell them to do what I need. I say, what would you like to do? And when I find the people who enjoy doing a certain thing, you know, their reward, their satisfaction that they find is like the farmer who just brings me a bunch of stuff. You know, he sees me make all this material and he goes, oh, that's really cool. And then, you know, I get the driver. Then the driver brings it to a storage depot, and the driver sees the storage depot getting more like full and full. And like some of the things that makes people really happy in Foxhole, at least from my perspective, doing nothing but pure logi, you know, they're happy when they can get a full container, bring it to a depot, and then, you know, 30 minutes later, 45 minutes later, they're like, wow, that depot's getting empty. And I'm like, yeah, look at the front line, and it's pushed a little bit. Or something's happened, whether it failed or not. You know, the satisfaction isn't necessarily this instant reward that people see. It's, you got to direct them to where the reward is. You got to say, hey, see what we did there? See how all this driving helped? And it does become like a draining task of 23 minutes back and forth to bring 40 crates of stuff to Loggerhead. But then they get a bit of a satisfaction when they see, ooh, look at all those shirts that we just went through. You made more? Yeah, I have another container. And then they get excited to bring it to the front because it's being used. Now, the solo Logi players, they get the burnout the most, like probably from your perspective, Wolfie, because I have always found the best way in Foxhole to get people to be happy and satisfied with the work they do is to not direct them into doing something. It's saying, what would you like to do, and then getting them towards well, I want to drive. Do you want to go pick up scrap because I have a scrapper? So they'll drive, they'll do that, and then, you know, maybe if the scrapper's not keeping up with the deliveries, he'll stop, he'll help farm them. I'll ask people, do you want to just go find some, you know, vehicles sitting around? Like the other day, there was 3 harvesters sitting south of Orleandar Homestead, no defenses around them, just sitting there at a component field, empty, because somebody, you know, was done emptying the field and didn't care that there was 140 RMATs per, you know, harvester sitting there, ready to be blown up by a guy in an LUV with a machine gun. That makes me very upset. Because then I have to build 3 more because there's a new player who's like, hey, I want to scrap, and I feel bad giving them a sledge when I'm sitting on 3,000 RMATs, and I'm like, just make a harvester and bring it back.
Wolfie,
and then
what were you saying?
And I'm happy.
I was just gonna make an inside joke between him. It's like probably just that and the rest saying that bush. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that like I actually do wholeheartedly agree. Like, yeah, they want to do that, right? But it's like this. But what I wanted to additionally mention is that that like these players, right? They have lives, right? Like they're not always going to be available. Like I have people that actually enjoy doing logistics. I do logi ops with them within my clan when CMD. Like we actually enjoy doing it, right? But the problem is that they're not always available. Like I barely play with them unless it's on the weekends, right? And then exam season comes every now and then, or just obligations and like. So it's like, and then this brings me to my other point, which is that like, okay, so this is going to be the most controversial thing that I'm going to say in this whole discussion, right? But I just feel like combat relies too heavily on logistics, and the reason I say that is because like, when it comes to the refinement times, right? It's like I'm pretty sure this. I'm pretty sure all of us know this is that the BMAT refinement time, or the scrap to BMAT refinement time, is definitely a lot less than explosive materials. And why I say this is that it's not a problem about foxholes and like those like early game structures, right? My problem is that when it comes to gun nests, right? Because the problem is that like it used to cost RMATs, I heard, right? But like I heard that worked pretty well, or maybe not that well, right? But the problem is that the war went too fast. Like it lasted like a bunch of days. But the thing is that like if you just look at the bigger picture, is that if someone actually noticed that, hey, I could get like a lot more BMATs to get these gun nests out or / repair them and then make and to make more gun nests instead of these, while these guys use their explosives or wait for them to get the explosives, we can actually just stall them out, right? And while that obviously doesn't happen like literally 95% of the time, right? because obviously there's going to be that constant fighting, there's going to be denying the builder's building, right? But I just feel like there's it has happened before, like whenever there's a massive tank push. This happened to me one time. I was in the tank column with like 2 others, and then the thing is that I was highly contested, right? And then whenever we would get pushed back, they just had the opportunity to have like 3 people just hammer in a quick AT turret, like bam, and then there we go. Like that delays us. And while yes, that is like, it is very subjective. I just feel like, it's just painful to go through that, and that's why I say is that, like, as a regular infantryman, it's like you wish you could do something, but it's like most, if not all, weapons against gun nests are nullified. And like, yes, you could say that I remember, I'm not sure about this because I haven't been keeping up lately due to exams, but I remember that there was like the hit nullification or some stat that allowed like small arms to actually do some form of damage against the gun nest. But what I'm getting at is that, like, before, or at least still right now, is that there are going to be players that are going to have to like temporarily shift to logic to just get these things to the front, like just drive or just make them fresh, like just to progress the front. Because it's like, if you stand there, what are you going to do? I mean, not every single player is just going to stand there and just shoot at someone when we need to push instead of put, because if we just kill each other, it's like, what's the point? Like, if you're on the attacking side, they're defending, they're the ones winning. You're not winning. You're supposed to push. You're supposed to take that town. You're wasting more things. You're just wasting more.
Defenders always have the advantage in burning through less equipment than attackers. So Markfoot says he has to go soon. So I just want to interrupt with your thing about AI defenses, because I do a lot of Logi, and AI defenses are the lifeblood of Logi players, because we need those, because we don't have infantry to bodyguard us 24/7. I love gun nests, because gun nests are the only thing that stops, well, they're almost the only thing that stops partisans with a machine gun from screwing up our day. Pillboxes have to be built in very specific ways to stop a partisan from destroying our resource bases that people build, because they don't want to drive a crane out there every time. And it's a very upsetting to me, because it's like, that's cool that you built this huge base that costs a bunch of resources around a component field, but because you have foxholes and not gun nests, you just wait till nighttime, and then you could just outrange it with a rifle, and you're good to go. And you kill one foxhole, and then you can get between the gap of the pillboxes, and then they just eat away with it with a SMG, or if they have machine gun, then they just eat away with that, and they blow up hours worth of work. And it's just like, the only reason that base was put there is because people don't want to drive a crane down there, and moving upgrade parts is a goddamn nightmare when you've got 5,000 scrap to move to, and you're in a flatbed, not a truck.
Okay, I do notice and agree with that. It's just that the problem is that, like, I just want to highlight the issues that combat, but most things is that X beat Y. Like, I do understand, right, that, like,
to me, tanks have always been, like, tanks have been taking dirt where artillery is taking towns, in my opinion, or taking bases, what I should say. Because if you're within, like, the new efficiency system, I love watching front lines develop, because instead of having like multiple fobs that I have to look at and go, they have 10 shirts, they have 20 shirts, they have 30 shirts, they have 50 shirts, they have 60 shirts, it's that fob has 100 and something shirts, and there's no other fob between there and the base, and it makes my life a lot easier, because I decide, okay, that storage depot needs 40 crates of shirts, so let's hurry up and get that up there. Or they need more guns, they need more explosives, and it makes my life easier. And I feel like it shifts combat to more infantry, and it allows people in the back where I need some upgrade efficiency to build a base to stop partisans from ruining my day, that I wish AI defenses were a little stronger against things like LUV and partisans, even though just the other day, nobody built up Westgate, so Wardens drove two light tanks straight into Westgate, and they blew up the factories and the refineries, and they tapped them, and they blew up the town hall, and they tapped them and completely reset them. Something like that's really cool, but that's also just partly because some AI defenses, they just take too long to build up, and, you get punished if you don't make garrison supplies, and if not, you have to go around and you have to fix them all by hand, and nobody does that because that is a nightmare to do.
Yeah, but this is the issue that I want to highlight, is that, like, while, yes, that, like, I know that, like, all of that is true, but the problem is that, like, I mean, this is controversial too, but it's like, it's kind of subjective. It's like, while that is the lifeline of logistics, which is that they are more resistant to partisans just going in like that, right? Like on the front line, especially the period of time before tanks, and you just have half tracks. At least it might.
Maybe we should ask Mark before he has to go on his thing about AI defenses, because he's got to go soon. So I'm kind of curious to what Mark has to say about partisans.
Yeah, I just
and AI defenses.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna finish my thought off, which is that, like, it's just like, while it is good on the back line, right, is that there's just, even like the front line, it's restrictive, and that forces people to do logistics, but then that also means that, like, you're not gonna have the constant people that are gonna want to do the task, right? So when people on the front want to do logistics, right, they don't want to go through this boring task, even though, like,
that's a frontline player choice, just like how players chose not to build Westgate, and so Westgate got nuked the other day by tanks.
Let me just finish off this real quick. Is that it's like, this is just about the topic about, like, even though you can get players to do what they want, right? There are going to be players that don't want to do logic, but on the front line they're going to be forced to do it. That's all I just want to say. And then just bouncing back real quick, is that with the partisan thing, is that it's like how it's painful, like Sir said, even though it's supposed to be minor in like this major game. Like the primary thing that I feel like is that you just can't really outplay them. Like, sure, you have radio towers, you can have people that respond, you can have convoys, you can have people QRF, quick response forces on just deploy for you. But the problem is that, like, if you think about it as a driver, right, it's like you're not always going to have these people, at least in the current days, like, especially for me in low pop time zones, like I'm in the lowest pop time zone, it's just, you just don't get these people at all to always be there for you, so you're going to have to rock it solo. When you get hit by partisans, like, there's not much to do, is that your truck is just like vulnerable, like a bunch of rifle shots can just disable it. You can get SMG'd by one guy, and then that's it, you're gone. Like, you're gonna have to carry a weapon, and then even then they're gonna disable your truck. You may or may not have BMATs, and then there's just not really much of a way that you can outplay them. It's like, if there was only a way to, like, somehow outplay partisans in an LUV, like have car physics flip and, like, juke them or do a 180 turn and hit the brakes, it's like, yeah, that would be cool, but at the same time, it's like, it would be a very low chance of succeeding. But at least, like, allow players that chance, instead of being like, okay, I can do nothing because of the circumstances I play in. But yeah, just because Mark has to go, I'm gonna end it off there.
And I think we'll end it off here too. Mark, did you have any response to close us out? I guess on the topic of, the topic we're closing out here today is on commando work on partisans. What are your thoughts on that gameplay and in the comments?
Yeah, so I think again it ties back to, like, what I was saying earlier about having to redo things, right? And the pain of, like, you never have a stable ground. You never have, like, okay, I'm coming back to the third day of war, and I have some thing that I built up that I can, like, rely on, right? And why I think, at least with some of the experiences that I've had, is why a partisan hurts so much. It's not because I don't want the partisans to have any power in the game. It would suck if there wasn't a partisan game, because the whole point of having to secure your supply line, that's like a huge aspect of Foxhole, and if you no longer had to worry about securing your supply line, that would suck. But the thing that I do want to make better is, if you do get caught, right, if you do lose your flatbed truck, or like whatever it is, that recovering, like, is not as painful. But it's a balance. Like, you need to have stakes, but maybe it's the wrong side of the balance right now. And, like, it just goes back to that same point I've been making. Like, if you set everything up, if you set up like a mining operation as an example, right? Just the pain of losing your crane, because if a partisan came, if they blew up your crane, or if someone didn't know what they're doing and they moved it, or if somebody messes with your well-oiled machine, the recovery part is extremely painful, and I think I'd want to focus on figuring out how to smooth that over, or at least providing tools to be able to like counter it, right? So
bring back production parts.
All right, I actually do have to go in about a minute or so.
Yeah. So we'll leave it off there. We'll see if any of this conversation was satisfying for anyone, or if it'll have any effect on the actual development of the game. Who knows? But I guess
more Markfoot.
Yeah. Well, but the one thing that we did prove here is that we can actually talk about these things for an extended period of time. We are capable of not being animals. At least
the conclusion is that we all need to go into cryostasis so the devs have more time, and then we just wake up and then
Exactly.
everything's.
I wish that too.
That's actually a lot easier than solving logistics. But yeah, thank you to Foxhole Project Lead Mark, Volunteer Foxhole Discord Admin Sir, KronusWinter of Winter Legion Logistics, and HNS Wolfie of the Colonial Sigil. I'm gonna hit stop recording in 10 seconds. Anyone take the floor? Here we go. 10.
Alright, I just wanted to apologize to Markfoot, is because all the community makes it hard because everybody says random voices, so it's kind of hard to filter out everything. So I feel like we're kind of making it.
Well,
I
thanks,
actually didn't stop it there. I actually kept that in. No, I agree. I didn't know you were going to do that. I thought someone was going to troll me. All right, we're good.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Get trains!